we don't really have anything to recap, which I guess is a good way to start a
Yeah,
podcast. You don't have to be like, wait, what happened last week? Doesn't matter.
yeah, you could have listened to Gods of Egypt, you could have not. Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show where we watch and discuss the lore behind our favorite and least favorite fantasy films. I'm Cullen.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we have a special guest and Middle Earth super fan in a good way, my sibling Cait.
Hey everyone.
In a good way. Can you please show us your shirt? Give us this. What's going on here?
Okay, this is a shirt that our brother Connor got me for Christmas last year that says like Middle Earth's annual Mordor fun run. One does not simply walk.
I love that. That's awesome.
I'm just wearing a shirt with leaves in honor of my favorite Middle Earth kingdom, Lothlorien.
Nice.
Namesake of the best number in Lord of the Rings the musical.
I'm wearing flannel and a Cleveland Cavaliers beanie in honor of Galadriel.
Is she a Cavaliers fan?
Duh, she loves LeBron. That makes her a Lakers fan now, but she's an original 23 Cleveland Cavaliers fan.
Yeah, I could see that. That fits in her character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's in season 2 of Rings of Power.
Oh yeah.
LeBron James will just show up like Ed Sheeran did in Game of Thrones. Basketball.
So, as you can tell from the title of the episode that you clicked on, we're talking about 2001, Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings, first movie, part 1.
So, is it officially called The Fellowship of the Ring, or is it Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring?
I think it's Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring.
Because it's the first book.
Right. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I will say I've been watching Rings of Power, but I have not finished because you can tell that it was just greenlit based off the IP, not off a coherent pilot, because it's not that it's bad, it's just a little slow and there's things that are happening. I'm like, this should have been episode 1.
This could have been an email.
I have to say as well, towards the end, it like feels very rushed, and I've heard several different things about how it was originally supposed to be 10 episodes. It was originally supposed to be released all at once. There's definitely some like development issues that explain why.
That happened to Riverdale, season 1. That does happen, because the thing is, I watched the pilot and was like, okay, this is good, but then like I think the next few episodes things were a little too slow. And so it's not that I've been watching and been like, oh, this is boring, but like I can tell because I haven't finished it.
You gotta have to finish it because we need to talk about who Sauron is.
Yeah, I think I know, but yeah. All right. Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. It came out in 2001. Let me pull up my notes that I literally finished writing 12 minutes before episode time. Let's see. All right. Have we seen this movie before?
Yes, a lot of times.
So I have definitely seen all 3 of these movies. I think that for me, I had a hard time as a child watching this movie. I think it's why I never really got into it, is that there's so much happening and there's so many names and so many places and lots of lore that I just was like, this is very overwhelming. And just my little brain just could not handle it. I felt also like that watching it today. I watched it in two sittings. It's a lot, but it's still really good. My brain hurts a little bit.
I mean, so I was 12 when this movie came out, and it was like first time going to see a PG-13 movie that I remember being like, ooh, I'm only 12. I'll be 13 next month. Feeling edgy. And I had only read the book up until like they get to Tom Bombadil, and then I finished the book after watching the movie. But all of my friends were super into it. And then like, because the next month we all went to see it again, and like for almost every movie, I always would go like see it with family and then be with friends having a sleepover, watching the previous movie, and then going to see the new one. So it was like I didn't just watch these movies or read these books. I also lived it
Yeah.
as a middle schooler, which I feel like was like the perfect age to be like
Mhm.
delving into this.
It was your Twilight or Hunger Games in a way.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
like
Yeah,
honestly. And
because
because like,
we would have been like 7,
oh yeah, because
right?
Cullen has a story about
I
not
have a
getting to see
story.
the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had beef
Yeah,
with
I
this
mean,
franchise for a long time.
I was really young, and I think it's just like, and my mom wasn't into the books. She got into the movies when they came out, but I was just like, I didn't have anyone to be pushing me to watch it as I
Mm.
got older and stuff. But yeah, I was just like, I think that's what happened. Is like I was so young when I watched it, and I felt overwhelmed, and then I carry that into every time I go to watch it. Uh, but yeah, like, and I guess like maybe it is possibly a reason why I'm not super into high fantasy. Like we talked a little bit before we started recording that like I watched Game of Thrones and really liked it, but Cait made a good point that like isn't it kind of just like Game of Thrones is kind of like fantasy for people who don't love it. And it's just like yeah, I mean I guess I don't know. I liked it, but I was really
I
overwhelmed.
also feel like our dad really liked Lord of the Rings, and so did several of our uncles. And so, like, the
Right.
original books that I read were my uncles that were like falling apart.
Wow.
I think I brought them back from mom and dad's house. I want to say they're upstairs, but yeah, they were like falling apart. But I was just like, this is how you can tell this is a good book because I was like, it smells good and he's falling apart.
Yeah.
Um,
Mom read us
and
The Hobbit too, right?
yeah, but mom didn't really grow up with reading these because
Yeah.
she's not as much a fantasy person. She's more of a historical fiction
Mm.
person. And
Yeah.
so she, I think, still has my copy of The Two Towers with Legolas on it, but I don't know if she ever finished reading it. Um, because she got
Yeah.
into them like after like we
Yeah.
watched the movies and everything. But
Mm.
dad took Connor and I to see the first one, and we went with Mr. Murphy.
Yeah.
So it would always be like go see it with Dad, Connor, and Mr. Murphy, and then go see it with my friends.
Yeah. I mean, I remember mom reading The Hobbit, and in that way, I associated it with like the Prydain Chronicles, like we talked
Hmm.
about,
Mm.
featuring Lindsay, or along with. Um,
Lindsay.
but yeah, so I was not allowed to see this movie,
Mm.
and so I resented it for a very long time because Cait and Connor were allowed to, and I was not, because it would scare me, and it was true. So when we would see it when it came out on VHS, because we had the extended edition on VHS,
Two tapes.
two tapes. I would close. There are a lot of scenes that I still am like, oh yeah, because I was always closing my eyes. Like they're always like, don't watch.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I
I
mean, some
I
of those
also
scenes hold
remember,
up.
yeah, the scene where they're torturing Gollum. The second time I saw it, I was like, I'm with my friends. I'm gonna watch this scene because like I'm 13 now.
You're like, I'm gonna do
I
this, but not close my eyes.
like I remember going through like a phase of being like, this is how I'm gonna show that I'm mature. Watch this scene.
I was the same way with the Mummy. So Lyle and I just recently rewatched it, literally like I think we finished it last night. And I used to never watch the scenes with the scarabs. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they go like underneath the skin and it's
Yeah.
really creepy and gross. I used to never watch that as a kid because it scared me. And so I was like, wow, I'm really proud of myself. I can watch this. Don't even bat an eye.
I mean,
I'm an
when I was
adult.
9, when we were watching Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yeah,
Indiana
we both
Jones,
peaked.
yeah, our mom was like, "Don't look to see the Nazis getting their face melted," and like I remember looking
Oh,
and
I
being like,
thought
"Oh yeah,
I thought your mom was like, don't look at the art because it'll blind you.
No, it was
It'll
yeah,
melt your
no."
face.
yeah. So me and Cait looked, and that's why we're gay.
Is
There you
Because
that
Connor
why?
didn't. I just came up with that right now.
go.
uh, yeah. No, we were. So I had beef with this movie because by the time the third one came out, my mom was like, "You're old enough to see it if you want to," and I was like, "No."
When did the
Like
third one come out?
2003.
2003, yeah, because I
Oh,
was in
okay. I
ninth
thought it was
grade
later
then.
than
So I would have been 8.
No, 9, because I was in ninth grade. So like I
Okay.
was in 7th grade when the first one came out.
Yeah.
8th grade, second one, and then ninth grade for the
Yeah.
third one.
Yeah. I was allowed to, and I was like, no, I'm better
Yeah.
than that. So I was like, I looked down on this franchise, but I got into it because I was obsessed with Aragon and not the movie, the books. And there are only
Right, right.
2 out at the time. I never finished reading that series because it took so long to release that I was old enough to realize it was bad by the time the fourth one came out.
I
But
think I only read the first one.
but I was like super into it. And my mom was like, well, maybe you should read Lord of the Rings. And I like didn't want to. And then they like eventually I did. And then I became obsessed. And I read like the Silmarillion. I read like the Unfinished Tales. I read like everything. I have a board game called War of the Ring that takes about as long as it is to watch one of these movies to play. Because you basically reenact the whole thing like as like a Risk type game. And you can make the story go in different ways. I had multiple Lord of the Rings computer games. Most of the ones I liked were Battle for Middle Earth because it was like a Age of Empires but Lord of the Rings. But we also had that off-brand Fellowship game
I think of that often, and I have talked to other people about it because other people had that. Like what you have to like escape from the Shire and hide from the ringwraiths, and it was scary. And then you
it
also
was
have to
scary.
like fight Old Man Willow until Tom Bombadil saves you, and then there's a really trippy sequence with him and his wife singing. Like I think of it often. It was honestly like I could find that somewhere online, I'd probably play it again. I remember it being tough but fun.
Yeah.
I
Because we
also think
like
about
barely made it to the Aragorn level. Because it was like you could did Frodo, Aragorn, Gandalf, or something like that. But we like
Mhm.
we finished Frodo for like too much.
I also lost interest because like Frodo is my favorite. So I was like, I don't really feel like being these other people. Well, I have like more to say on that later. But I was also going to say, I remember when Connor and I were reading the books, Cullen, you were making your little radio show recordings on your little Fisher Price tape recorder, like
Yeah.
foreshadowing. And like he was interviewing us because he wanted us to say like our favorite fairy tale or nursery rhyme.
Yeah, I was
And
asking each. They were separate questions, and I was upset that Connor
yeah,
didn't know the difference. Yeah,
yeah, because he said Jack and the Beanstalk for a nursery
nursery
rhyme.
rhyme.
But I remember reading from the Fellowship when Frodo does his whole like it's like the extended Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock like that. And you were like, well, that seems boring.
Yeah, and I said that because Connor was explaining something with Aragorn. I was like, okay, just like garbage.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
some serious foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my
And his
favorite
like,
is when I
just his New England accent
yeah,
too.
because I had a New England accent as a child. Yeah,
Why?
because my mom and my grandma, so I would say certain
Oh,
words. We're gonna
okay.
make a
Making a
recording.
recording.
I love this.
Yeah.
I need home videos. Come on, Callahan's giving home videos.
Yeah,
We have
these
a cassette,
I'm sure
like a
it's
cassette somewhere.
yeah, I'm sure it's on a cassette somewhere. And then yeah, so I also had the miniatures from the Warhammer
Oh yeah.
like paintable game. I was not good at painting them, and the guys at that shop would kind of roast me. But I was pretty young.
Yeah.
I think it was like 8th to 9th grade. I was like into that.
It's that's like the sweet spot age to get into it, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like population
Yeah.
kills thing.
Yeah. So uh I've seen these movies so many times. I had a friend in college who was obsessed. I think the last time I saw them was we watched them all at his bachelor party. Wild times. But
all three of the movies at the
yes.
bachelor party. That's what you did.
It was a
Mhm.
weekend. So we
So
also went
that's
kayaking.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
we like
Got
I
it.
remember me and one of his high school friends, like the three of us, stayed up all night to watch the sunrise. That was
Okay.
my
Cool.
highlight.
Yeah.
But he
Very Lord of
always
the Rings
wanted to
moment.
watch Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
I mean, last year when so during the pandemic, I made a bunch of friends on gay Lord of the Rings Twitter. And there's a Bilbo's birthday party that happens in one of the local parks here, like that the Tolkien Society puts on. And so people who didn't live, like a lot of us lived in LA, but people who didn't live in LA like flew out for it and also happened to be at the same time. One of the theaters in Pasadena was like showing the extended editions in the theaters that over that weekend. So I went and saw like Two Towers and Return of the King in theaters again. I missed the Fellowship for whatever reason. It came out like a little bit earlier. Um, but like that was like a very emotional experience because it was like we had all gone through a hard time together. like the
Mhm.
character.
Yeah, for sure.
So this was my first time, I feel like, though, watching the movie, as Harry Styles would say, a real go to the theater movie. Because this
Yeah.
was my first time kind of watching it separate from like lore, because I was watching it by myself. I was just like looking at it as a movie, like
Mhm.
as in conversation with Gods of Egypt and Frozen and all these other movies we're watching. So just kind of like as an adaptation of like mythology and fairy tales.
Mhm.
And that was kind of cool to kind of
Yeah.
see it that way. Yeah. So this movie came out 2001, directed by Peter Jackson, written by
This was
Peter.
before 9/11, right? Or was it after 9/11?
It was
All of these
after.
movies were filmed in like 98, 99
Yeah.
in New Zealand, and all three of them were filmed at once. But yeah, it came out after 9/11.
After 9/11. Okay.
Yeah.
But like it would have been filmed before then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we will definitely, I think in the Two Towers, I want to talk about the cultural
People were
moment.
weird.
Yeah, the cultural moment of the War on Terror and how I think it affected the reception of these films.
Yeah.
So directed by Peter Jackson, written by Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens. It stars Elijah Wood as Frodo, Sean Astin as Sam, Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf, Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, Christopher Lee as Saruman, Orlando Bloom, Mr. Katy Perry as Legolas, Scene Bean, as I called him as a kid, as
Scene
Boromir. Liv Tyler as Arwen, daughter of an American Idol judge. Cate Blanchett as Galadriel, John Rhys Davies as Gimli, Dominic Monaghan as Merry, and Billy Boyd as Pippin. Brief conversation. So when people asked why everyone in this movie was white, the creators were like, it's for historical accuracy. Again, historical accuracy to what?
Yeah.
And it's a shame because when Tolkien was trying to get the Hobbit published in German, like the Nazis were like asking, like, hey, are you like related to any Jews or something? And he was just kind of like, you know what? Fuck you guys. I don't want you to have it. Like he was not a Nazi.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't
And
agree
also
with
like
this. He's like, I know a lot of
Sam
great Jewish people. Yeah.
Sam is canonically brown. And it's we don't necessarily know like what shade of brown. Is it just that he works outside and so his hands are brown, but like his hands are described as brown, and so is Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Who's not in this film.
Similar to in the Snow Queen, how they reference Kay having a brown neck, despite it being set in Scandinavia.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. In its initial release, this movie grossed 313.4 million in the United States and Canada, 547.2 million in the rest of the world, for a world total of 860.5 million, making it the second highest grossing film of 2001 and the fifth highest grossing film of all time at the moment of its release.
10 of those dollars were from me, because you could go see a movie for $5 back then.
Back in our day.
Yeah. So the backstory when we talk about this. Well, because this is a big franchise, we're doing the three movies separately. We're
doing them all today, right now.
I'm gonna talk about Tolkien. I'm gonna reference like why he made the Legendarium, as the whole kind of thing it's called now. And I'm gonna reference some key elements of myth that this franchise pulls off of. Later on, we're going to talk about War on Terror, but we're also going to talk about like the lore that Tolkien made for the world and how that reflects in the books. And I think we're going to do that for Return of the King, because I think that's where it becomes the most relevant. Yeah, because it'd be too much to do all of that, and we already have so much movie to discuss. So real quick, Fellowship of the Ring was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, published in the 1950s. He was a poor Englishman who became a professor of linguistics and English language at Oxford. He fought in World War I, so he knows about the masculinity often invoked by men who have never seen combat and want to talk about masculinity online. So I just want to say that. He's also very Catholic. He loved inventing languages, and he wanted to make like a mythology for England. King Arthur, not good enough for him. So he combined...
Because it's French.
Yeah, a lot of King Arthur stuff is either Welsh or French. Remember me trying to say Caleb Welch or whatever in the Black Cauldron episode?
Yeah, and we're like, the Welsh people are shaking.
Yeah. So he combined these loves to create the fantasy world of Middle Earth, which is canonically supposed to be like a pre-history of Europe. Yeah, so he set in this world his children's book The Hobbit, and then later Lord of the Rings, and several other supplementary or historical works like the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales. It became a cult hit, especially with hippie culture for its environmental themes. It exceeded all kind of expectations that the publishers had and became the foundation for like the modern fantasy genre.
Hmm.
So again, like Frozen, this is a cultural reset.
So you said that The Hobbit is considered a children's book.
Yes, like the
Interesting.
And
tone
it
is
reads
very
like a
different.
children's
Right.
book. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
There's a talking wallet at one point. Like, yeah, it's very
Interesting.
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is why they made so many changes when they adapted it into one of the most bloated franchises I've ever had to witness.
Oh, yeah.
Best
Yeah.
adaptation is the Rankin Bass one, hands down.
Yes. So magical rings, tales old as time. King Solomon has one in like Islamic lore that he uses to control the jinn. The beast gives one to Bel. But we're gonna reference the rings of Norse mythology because that's specifically like what Tolkien was basing this off of. So Odin had a ring Draupnir. It was made by dwarves and it duplicated all the time, and he gave it to his son Balder, who, when Loki killed him, he put it on the funeral pyre. Balder gave it back to Hermod when Hermod visited Hel to try and get Balder back. We referenced that in the Book of Life episode. And then when Odin and Loki and Honir, they had to pay the debt to a king because they killed his son while his son was shapeshifting as an otter. So they killed him and they had to give back all this gold. And instead of using all their gold, Loki stole it from a dwarf who then cursed the gold in the ring that it would bring everyone who owned it ruin. So then one of that king's sons who got the gold became so obsessed that he turned into a dragon and he was guarding the gold. And so then this guy Sigurd killed the dragon, won the ring. Later, he gave it to the Valkyrie Brunhilde, who he rescued from an enchanted sleep. And their lives were just kind of filled with tragedy, and the ring was more of a symbol of the inevitable fate of doom. Now, this was slightly altered in the Ring cycle of operas written by Wagner, an anti-Semite who has later had his works used as Nazi propaganda by Hitler and his descendants. So this opera cycle turns the ring into something that has the power to control the world, and the ring itself inspires greed and rage, and people fight over owning it. So that's very much, like the ring in Lord of the Rings. So that's probably where he was pulling it from. Vikings would also swear oaths on rings that like the priests had in the temple. So it's like their Bible. Yeah. So wizards are also in Lord of the Rings. Again, stories of men with magical powers, very old. The idea of like that white bearded wizard though is kind of connected to the god Odin, who would do that and like walk around and like learn lore and hidden knowledge. And then this was really built on with Merlin, the child of a woman who drank holy water after having sex with the demon. And
Cool.
So
Plan
he's
B.
Yeah, so he's like the most famous like old
Plan
wizard
C
guy.
for Christ.
Plan C.
There you go.
And so the old wizard trope, like Gandalf, Dumbledore, both descend from this. We had a professor who people would call Dumbledore because of his vague musings, and I was always like, that's why I like Gandalf, because he gives you clear instructions.
Yeah, Maddie and I had this conversation as well. I also feel like then this is the origin of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And there is a
Yeah.
connection between Star Wars and Lord of the Rings because Star Wars is not hard sci-fi.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, well, Middle Earth and Elvish is Endor, which is the moon where the Ewoks are. And you have the battle of nature versus machine.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're very Lord of the Rings is so foundational to like the heroic journey genre. The idea of like an order of wizards reflects our many secret society of magicians in Christian Europe through the Middle Ages to the present day, as well as like druids, the priests of the Celtic world, who are later a secret society that racist Winston Churchill was a part of. There's also like the Zoroastrian religion and the Magi, and they were the people who followed the star to the birth of baby Jesus. So that's kind of where we get like the wizards. And now I want a Lord of the Rings themed nativity pageant, and I'm sure that actually exists somewhere.
Well, because there's 5 wizards in Middle Earth. We only ever really see 2 of them.
We only see 2 of them in the movie. One of them was cut. And
Radagast?
Yeah, and it's very funny though because they talk about like our order. It's like we only ever hear from 2 of them, so it's like,
well, not all clubs have all active members. Okay.
Well, also the 2 blue wizards went off to the east, and even like in interviews when people asked Tolkien like what's up with them, he's like, I actually don't know.
Yeah,
like so that is open to much interpretation.
They did not pay their dues. Their members in bad standing.
One of them was in The Hobbit, or was it Radagast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a little miniature of him that I painted, but it came out before the Hobbit movie, so he doesn't look the same.
I always thought of Radagast as more of like a St. Francis of Assisi type guy.
He was concerned with the plants and animals, which I'm like, somebody had to be. Yeah. So elves and dwarves. So we kind of talked about them a lot in the Black Cauldron episode. So pretty brief recap. Elves, Alfar, Norse mythology, benevolent beings who serve the well-endowed god Freyr and Affelheim. Remember the Lego movie we made about him?
Yes, I also listened to the Black Cauldron.
Black Cauldron episode. Yeah, so they kind of became fae, and then with that, the idea of the alluring, morally neutral fairy queen. She was big in medieval literature. Dwarves, dark elves lived underground, made treasures like Thor's hammer. This lore, the Tolkien lore, really established them as 2 separate beings, or like 2 separate races that like had beef. Like that's where this comes from. Let's talk about orcs, goblins, and trolls. We talked about trolls in Frozen. Goblins similar in that they just kind of meant generally malevolent spirit or fairy, you know. And then orcs are a Tolkien original. They come from
it's like goblins are smaller and then orcs are a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Interesting.
Goblins are like the underground variant. But in Tolkien, he got it from the Old English word for like hell spirit, and then the French term for ogre. You know,
Ogre.
all-star.
Shrek?
Yeah, Shrek.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Latin name for Hades was Orcus, ruler of the underworld. So that's kind of where we get orc. From the inception of the novels, there are accusations of racism because they represent the dark-skinned other to the light-haired European heroes, and they're like evil with like no sense of humanity. So I think this discussion is worth having. So Tolkien, I think, kind of made them more as like video game minions that like, this is people you have to fight. You don't have to worry about like killing a bunch of people. But that's still an interesting concept to think about. And he was a white European who loved white European culture, specific in his credit, pre-colonial medieval European culture. You know,
right.
You know, and that's very centralized in his world vision. So as an individual, he was opposed to racism and anti-Semitism, and he disagreed with people who interpreted his work as promoting those values.
Right.
But it's fair that you could interpret it that way, especially see like how the fandom reacted to casting people of color in Rings of Power. And then they
reacted the same way with like Arwen and these movies. So like the circle of idiot. Just continues to be terrible on the internet.
And you have the division of West versus East, with West being more positive, which you know, in Christianity, East is typically shown as positive. But you know, West was an Egyptian, Hathor, mistress of the West, where the dead went was the West. And then that has kind of really fed this kind of modern narrative of like the West and like Western society. So I think in the books and movies of Lord of the Rings, it's much more subconscious. They're like, yes, this is what we're trying to do, but it's still there. And the story itself promotes people of different languages and cultures working together. And that doesn't mean it doesn't come from a very white Anglo-centric view, but like it's still like, it's not, the story isn't saying everyone needs to be like the hobbits or everyone needs to be like the elves. It's like we all have our different strengths and weaknesses and we have to work together. So, you know, it's an example of you can interpret the same piece of media many different ways.
So makes it interesting.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, because Tolkien's love of like medieval European culture came more from, oh, I really like this, as opposed to a lot of like people in that East versus West, like Western culture thing. They're more about what they're against. They're more about, well,
he's more of like, I just think these guys are really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
he's like that like meme. I just think they're neat.
You know, yeah, which is something I talked about, I think maybe in our first episode, how people say, oh, I love like Western values, but they couldn't tell you anything about like the Brothers Grimm or the French monarchy or anything that people in the West like actually did, you know. So again, I think it's an interesting conversation to have about orcs, but I don't think he intentionally meant for orcs to represent like people who weren't white.
Right.
And then there's also the Uruk-hai.
Yeah, and we'll talk about them in the narrative of the film. But orcs have become a staple of fantasy, and that comes with stories that give them nuance and humanity. I think that's big in the Warcraft franchise. Or this
is
book.
A book that I'm reading about an orc who hangs up her sword and goes starts a coffee shop.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun chill read.
The movie that came to mind was Bright, starring Will Smith and Joel Edgerton as an orc.
We'll have to talk about that movie.
We certainly will.
Terrible things.
I can't wait.
David Ayer did that today. Yeah.
Wow. Oh God, I cannot wait. Okay, anyway, but that's literally what comes to mind, because when you said that like orcs were sort of his creation, I thought it was like, oh my God, wow, they really went and just modernized that idea with Will Smith. That's fascinating.
That's quite the pipeline.
It is. Oh my gosh.
From the Roman name for the god Hades to
the Fresh Prince.
Yeah. Hobbits, another original invention of Tolkien. They're very similar to leprechauns or brownies, which are these like, they were house spirits or house elves of lore, but key fact, they were not slaves. People didn't own brownies. They just like liked to live in your house and do shit, but like you weren't their boss, and if they pissed you off, they would like burn your milk.
Leave it to J.K. Rowling to create a weird narrative.
Of course.
Yeah. So they're unique to Middle Earth, but they've established themselves as kind of a fantasy staple. So the public domain, halflings and like D&D, like they're the public domain. But I think their presence is what makes these books so good. And
it's also like he came up with the name Hobbit as like a weird little language thing to amuse himself while grading papers, which like as an educator, I relate to this because it just the origin of the word is like Hobbitla, something about like living in the ground.
Yeah.
And that's what they do.
They live in the
Hobbit houses.
So cozy.
That's their whole
honestly, little interior decoration tangent here. Would love to live in a Hobbit house, just saying.
Yes.
So cute.
They're so cozy. Their whole vibe is just like cozy, warm, like
Hobbit core. That's what I'm into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it says like what does he say? Like there's no it's no bad thing to love a simple life or something like that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Queer readings of Lord of the Rings. So we will probably link this article that I read about it, because I think I'm just going to very briefly summarize. So Tolkien was very Catholic, but he was also openly friends with people who are openly queer. And that's like, I know like now that's like kind of the bare minimum, but at that time, that's like a big deal.
Yeah.
He also had numerous close friends at war, many of whom died, and some are, based on what their writings, have been thought to be gay. And he based Frodo and Sam off this relationship between these upper class officers and their lower class Batman. So like they'd have a Christian Bale. No, they like
I'm vengeance.
Rachel. So they would have these these like they were kind of bodyguards slash servants, and they would have close relationships that were being depicted in literature at that time as homosexual.
Mm.
Are you talking about Molly's article?
Yes. I just
Okay.
found this article, and Cait happens to like know the person.
Yeah, one of the gay Lord of the Rings Twitter,
Right,
like
makes sense.
one of the main characters of that
Yeah.
film.
Really good article, so we'll definitely link it. Like, because Frodo and Sam, they truly love and value each other, and a lot of the men in this franchise do. I think that's what elevates it above a lot of other action franchises. Um, Grief and sorrow are and affection are all parts of masculinity, according to Tolkien, a man who fought in one of the most barbaric conflicts humanity has ever seen. So, like, I'm sorry, you may be on like a football team, but like, do you really know more about masculinity than someone who fought in the trenches of World War One? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like a both and, like the queer reading is definitely present, as well as like just the fact these men are so tender with each other. And it's like, um, it's why it bothers me when there's so many like toxic masculine takes on these books and this film. And I'm like, how did we come away with it with this same feeling? Because like that is not what's there, both in the film or the source material.
Because how you make stakes feel high is if people have true affection for each other.
Yes.
Which is something we talked about with Gods of Egypt, and how the lack of intimacy in that core relationship made some of the stakes feel just kind of like whatever, okay.
Yeah. So kind of building off of our theory from that episode, because we thought maybe it's like humor is a really key part of that, but no, really it is like these people have a relationship and they care for each other. That's how we can care for these characters even more, or actually at all in Gods of Egypt's terminology. So like, yeah.
Well,
Not to get like too far into it, but like I think like when I would kind of like start to like kind of zone out during all the stuff that was happening, like anytime there was a moment where like someone is saving another person, or like spoiler alert, when Gandalf falls off the cliff and they're like mourning, but they have to keep moving on. I was so like into that moment. Like, man, Gods of Egypt had that perfect film.
Perfect film. Well, because that's just story writing. Like, people have to care about what's happening for us to care.
There's also like a lot of little details that I know like from behind the scenes, like because Ian McKellen, who is a gay man, like would tell like Sean Astin, like make sure you do this in this scene because it happens in the book and people will be looking for it. And it was just little things where like he touches Frodo's hand and like you don't, it's not a big deal, but like he was like, we got to make sure that this is there.
Yeah. Because that the Frodo Sam relationship, I think, is the heart of the whole franchise. This whole, so I think the relationship, you can interpret it as friends, you can interpret it as romantic. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of track that. Because I like the idea that, men could just like love each other and be affectionate without it being sexual. But I think the fact that it's yet like a yes and situation, you can interpret it both ways. And
that's what makes it a good story.
And it's doesn't feel like, I think the term queer baiting has been used to the point where it doesn't really mean anything. But like they're like, Darren Criss is painting his nails, like queer baiting. It's like, well, a human isn't capable of, that's a media flaw, but okay. But
he's painting is like, oh yes, the queers, they're gonna love it.
I'm baiting them. I don't know, it feels like authentic to the characters. It doesn't feel
I think like there's something to it because like as someone who was like a very closeted queer tween watching these movies come out, like you see yourself but you don't know why.
So let's talk about the movie. Take it away, Galadriel. We got Rings of Power. The world has changed. This gives us the backstory that Black Cauldron did not.
I thought the same thing. I was like, where was Galadriel when we needed her in that movie? Honestly.
Come on, Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, come on.
She just
and honestly, like I was like, wow, this is like a really long exposition dump, but I'm like, also this is very important information. So I paid attention very closely. And realized things like I had never caught. Like, I'll be honest, I have probably seen this movie all the way through probably like 6 times. And I come away with it like knowing something new, but then remembering nothing. And I don't know why. I just think there's just so much. And I just,
Yeah. So there she talks about the rings of power, 3 for the elves, like the 3 good fairies, 7 for the dwarves, like the 7 dwarves in Snow White, 9 for men, like the 9 rings in Dante's Inferno because they fucking suck. And 1 forged in Mount Doom by Sauron, in which he poured into it his malice, his cruelty, and his will to dominate all life.
The scene where he's like,
yeah,
that was I was like, did not quite age super well when he's like, I'm making a ring, I look like a bionicle.
Yeah. There's this movie like flirts, it never veers into camp, which is surprising, and it takes itself so seriously, but it somehow works.
I think part of it is like the acting is what, because the times where it's like get cheesy, it's because a weird special effect is happening or somebody who's not a character with a face.
Yeah,
I feel like those are the parts where I'm like, we're veering close to the line.
Yeah. The last alliance of men and elves fights Sauron. Isildur cuts off the ring, saves the day. He keeps the ring.
The part where he's like this with the finger.
The charcoal finger. Yeah. He gets killed. The ring betrays him. Okay, the birds are being so loud again.
Yeah, I heard it a lot in the edit, and I was like, "This is fine." And then you were like, "Should I do?" And I was like, "Yes." Like when I was editing, I was like, "Yes, Cullen, please shut the window."
So Gollum takes it. He becomes warped until Bilbo picks it up. And now
that's when we learn its name, Precious, based on the novel Sapphire.
Push
by Sapphire.
Yeah. Welcome to the Shire. It is a quaint countryside of hobbits living their little provincial life. Bilbo is getting Bill. That's
Bill. That's the pony.
Nickname basis. Yeah.
Bilbo's getting ready for his 111th birthday. So at some point we need to do an episode on the VeggieTales adaptation of Lord of the Rings.
Yes, Lord of the Beans.
Yeah. So Bilbo isn't aging. What's his secret? It's an evil ring that wants to dominate all life. Doctors hate him. Gandalf the Grey, pointy hat wizard who makes fireworks. He comes to town. He's greeted by Bilbo's nephew, a pale little femboy named Frodo. They have a really sweet relationship, and Gandalf has been declared a menace to society, or disturber of the peace.
His reaction is just like, oh, okay, and I'm like, me too, Gandalf. That's how I feel, because when my profession gets attacked by society, I feel like in this watch through, even though I've like seen it since being an adult, I definitely like found elements of Gandalf more relatable, probably because I'm an adult and a teacher. Versus like as a kid when you identify more with the hobbits. It's not that I don't identify with the hobbits anymore. It's just like I see a new side of Gandalf.
Yeah. I mean, Ian McKellen just plays him so well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's just like he has this warmth and sternness. Yeah.
Because their first meeting, Frodo and Gandalf, is really interesting. Like it kind of is like tense. It's like tense at first, and then like laughing, and I was like, "What a weird relationship."
Yeah, he's like, "You're late," and he's like,
"Precisely on time."
My friends and I used to say that to each other all the time. It's like how we greeted each other when I was a kid.
Watching this movie is like, where do I know this line from? Oh, from Cait and their friends growing up saying it all the time.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of quotable lines. I also like get introduced to Frodo because he's like reading under a tree, and it's like, so I'm like, I want to hang out there.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, the Shire's gorgeous.
I mean, Frodo was my favorite as a kid, and I feel like this was like one of the points where I like fell in love with him because he's just like reading a book.
At the very beginning, you're like hooked.
Yes.
I mean, Bilbo implies he's planning on making a dramatic exit at his birthday party.
Bilbo's very gay. He loves drama.
Yeah.
So
theatrical, a thespian.
Yeah, he's gonna go see the world. He hasn't told Frodo. Bilbo's relatives are the doctors that hate him. They're mad that he's lived so long. They want the house. They want that generational wealth.
They're very like Jane Austen characters. The
Mm.
Sackville Bagginses.
I do love that like everyone in the Shire is in their like own different genre. Like they're living their own little like small town BBC sitcom while like the rest of the world is like going to shit. Um it's time for a big birthday party. Frodo's telling his friend Sam it's time to ask Rosie to dance. Sam is shy. He's like, I'll have another ale, and he like pushes him in and they dance. Frodo helps Bilbo hide from the relatives, and Bilbo is like, I adopted you because you're special. You'll be fine. That is a way of saying goodbye.
I honestly like Bilbo. Bad choices. Like I understand that like he has an evil ring that probably is influencing some of these selfish
Yeah.
choices, but you just this is where you start to feel sad for Frodo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Merry
Do
and
we ever
Pippin.
know what happens to his family?
I think
Oh, they were his parents were drowned, yes.
Oh, geez. Does we know about that in the movies, or is it just from the
No,
books?
yeah.
it's in the
Okay.
books
Interesting.
because they say they were drowned because I'm pretty sure Sam's dad informs us of this information.
Okay.
Merry and Pippin are comic relief. They're
My favorite
here.
characters. Love
I
them.
identify a lot with Pippin.
I was gonna say I feel like a Mary.
The way
We're
that I
Merry and Pippin.
I was describing like both of them to Maddie, and I was like, well, because they're both wealthier, like Frodo, and that,
Right.
but Merry, because he's like supposed to inherit Brandybuck Hall, he's just like a little bit more responsible and aware of things. Whereas Pippin is like that younger kid who goes off to art school, like generational wealth, like trust
Yeah.
fund kid, like with his little scarf.
Yeah.
And I honestly like I think maybe when Gandalf is just like dealing with them, I'm like, this is also why I relate to Gandalf. I'm like, they would not be seated next to each other in class. You
No. Yeah. When I was a kid and I saw these movies, Gandalf and Sam were my favorite. And I think that's still true, but I have a special spot for Pippin.
Mhm.
Uh,
I
I feel
also
like
like Sam and
I,
Frodo, but
I
like,
feel like
yeah.
Sam is who I want to be and Pippin is who I am. Uh, so they steal a firework, it turns into a dragon, people are running and panicking, and then it sparkles, they're like, okay, cool, that was fun. They're like, back to partying. Bill
Yeah, Frodo like jumps Bilbo, is like, look out for the dragon. He's like, there hasn't been a dragon here in 1,000 years.
I also love Gandalf dancing at this party.
So
I'm like, this is
tall.
how I feel when I'm doing like the Cupid Shuffle at homecoming because it's like become like the thing that I do. The kids are always just like, Callahan's doing the Cupid Shuffle. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Like
Bilbo makes dramatic exit. And if I'm learning anything from this podcast, is that this genre is built on people being dramatic at events.
Yes.
Gods of Egypt, Frozen, Book of Life had some people being dramatic at events. Brothers Grimm,
there's
Black
no one there
Cauldron
to
miss.
watch. Is it a dramatic
Is
event?
it a dramatic event? That's what Black Cauldron was missing, an event for people to be dramatic
Yeah,
at.
that was the only thing that was wrong with that movie.
Yeah, there's no parties in that movie.
Yeah, I
It is
mean,
pretty grim.
there's the Cooligans or the minions drinking with that exotic dancer.
But the thing is like in
Right.
this you have to have a reason to like have something to save. That's why you have like
The
Bilbo's
Shire.
birthday.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I
If
think
you
that's
don't have that, then there's like, what are we saving? Your little pig
Yeah,
farm?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, is there a village here? I don't even know. I think you're in the middle of nowhere. You
Yeah,
guys are
like
the last people on Earth. Why do we care?
where's Lindsay's kingdom? Like,
Yeah. Do her
uh,
It
parents
is on
care
an
about her?
island, fun fact, but that's in the book.
yeah.
Oh.
So Gandalf is like, okay, you think you're so clever, get over yourself. That don't impress me much, Shania Twain.
Oh,
Well,
I've been
because
listening
he's
to
like,
Shania so much lately. Just a little tangent.
I just feel like Gandalf is like, I know what you're about here and not approved. But he
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily like tell him like don't do it. And that's why I feel like Gandalf is a good teacher because he's there, he listens, he makes his comments, but it's like it's ultimately up to you to make your little decisions.
Yeah, he's like, you should leave the ring to Frodo. And he's like, it's my precious, based on novel pushed by Sapphire. And he's like, you sound like somebody else. Like, that's embarrassing for you. And
Cringe.
cringe. And he's like,
Peak Hobbit cringe.
yeah. And so he puts it in an envelope because he almost leaves with it. He's like, yeah, I'll give it up. Then he almost leaves.
And
And
he like
Gandalf,
the dramatic fall to the floor.
yeah. And Gandalf won't touch it. He like puts it in the envelope. And
Can't
then
touch
Frodo,
this.
no. So Frodo's like, hey, where did my uncle go? And Gandalf is like, he left. Here's his ring.
This is your house now.
This is your house. Keep it secret, keep it safe. And Frodo is like, okay, I don't really care about this ring, but sure.
I'm gonna put it in a chest under some scrolls.
Yeah. Gandalf goes to the Minas Tirith library.
Also, fun fact though, it is also Frodo's birthday.
Yes.
Wait,
he gets
what?
abandoned on his own birthday.
Yeah, he and Bilbo,
birthday.
yeah, share a birthday. But like even in the book, he celebrates Bilbo's birthday every year, but he doesn't celebrate his own. Like you just feel like Frodo is very tragic because like he's upset, like his uncle leaves.
Yeah.
Without explaining. And then Gandalf is like, I have some stuff to do. And then he's just like, I'm in this big house by myself. And two of the people I care about have just left.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I think Frodo's our first nominee for worst fucking birthday in the genre. I mean, we'll have to keep track because I know Aurora has some doozies. But like I think Frodo's right now winning for worst birthday in the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gandalf goes and does
some
Middle
research.
Earth Google.
Middle Earth Google. It's like, okay, it's like, yeah, he's like, it's the one ring if it has these markings. Meanwhile, these dark riders are out the ring race. They're asking for Shire and Baggins. I tried to be like, is there any history about the word wraith? Just a word for ghost. They have nothing special.
I do also like Gandalf doing his research is a mood because he's like hat is over on top of his staff in the corner, and then he's just like drinking something and it's like I was like, me too, Gandalf.
Me prepping for this podcast episode.
Reading scrolls, honestly, reading actual scrolls.
Like, I don't know, just like so much about Gandalf in this movie. I was like, this is a mood. I'm here for this. Going to the public library to go do some research.
Yeah, there's only one in all of Middle Earth. He has to. Yeah, so the hobbits, they're drinking at the pub. Sam is into Rosie, and these guys are like, oh, sweet mane of the golden ale, and Sam's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then Frodo's like, don't worry, she can tell an idiot when she sees one. And he's like, can she?
Does she? My friends and I used to also say that to each other. We also, you know, the line where it's like, you're sounding like Bilbo, cracked, and look at Frodo here, he's cracking. And then he's like, and proud of it. My friends used to say that about me. And I would respond like, and proud of it. Because I was usually Frodo when we like dressed as characters.
Yeah. I was called it pre-industrial cosplay. Cosplaying before the cosplaying industrial complex. Yeah, because they're all at the tavern and they're basically like, storms a brewing, you know, and out in the world, but who cares, you know, like so Gandalf goes back to the Shire. He's like, okay, throw that ring in the fire. And then he's like, does it have markings?
He doesn't, and Frodo's like, what the fuck are you doing?
He just like shows up in the dark.
He's like, where is it? And then he goes to the chest and underneath the scrolls, he pulls it out, throws it in the fire. And then almost immediately is like, Gandalf pulls it out of the fire and he's like, here, hold this. It's cool. I was like, is it? Is it?
Well, because then he kind of goes like this, so it's a little hot.
Yeah.
But also like, because he was walking home, there's like a weird breeze. He drops Sam off.
Yeah.
And then like he's like, something's going on in my house.
Something's coming. West Side Story.
It looks like he got
version.
like ransacked.
Yeah. But the ring is cool because so there's a lot of fire imagery in this movie, but a fun fact, the evil god in Lord of the Rings had an association with ice and cold. So yeah. But he's like, does it have markings? And Frodo's like, no, and Gandalf is like, oh my god. And then Frodo's like, actually,
some form of Elvish.
When at that part, I wrote down like when I take a COVID test.
Yeah, the markings slowly appear.
Yeah.
And it says one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. And I said, okay, Christian Grey. Because I had always kind of interpreted it as like binding the rings, but I'm like, no, it means he's gonna bring all the people and put them in chains in the darkness. So he's like, okay, this ring is evil. He explains what it is. That this is, which again points over. I'm not too familiar with the Harry Potter franchise, but I'm pretty sure Dumbledore is hiding behind that boy half the time. So like,
yeah, excellent point.
Frodo's given all the information.
The ring is a Horcrux.
Yes.
Like,
and instead of withholding that information, it's like, hey, I need you to take this to a mountain to drop it in some fire and destroy it. Dumbledore would be like, yeah, no, we're gonna wait seven years to do something about this. Even though I know that these things.
He also doesn't ask Frodo to do it. Frodo volunteers. It's still ultimately his choice. And I also think it's interesting, like, there's like a meme where it's like somebody peeking over someone's shoulder in school, and it's like Voldemort peeking over Sauron's shoulder.
But so he gives Frodo all the information he's like needs and is capable of understanding at that point. And
Frodo's also very well read. Like, I think they do a decent job of depicting it in this book. Like, but he, like, most of the things that Bilbo knows about, he knows about as well. Like, he can speak Elvish.
So Frodo's like, okay, and he's like, well, you should take it. And Gandalf is like, don't tempt me. Like, you don't want to see me with that ring. You don't want to see me before I've had my coffee. And then so he's like, go meet me at the village of Bree outside of the Shire. This is the origin story of every D&D tavern. They're all based off of the Prancing Pony in Bree.
Well, the D&D is based off of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I mean, it's heavily influenced. And then Sam is eavesdropping. I wasn't dropping no eaves, sir. In the garden. A
little late to be trimming the verge.
He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I heard about this like ring and stuff and the Dark Lord, and I don't know. And he's like, well, I guess you know about this, so like it'll be good. Frodo will have some company, like travel with him. And this movie doesn't quite explain, but it's more implied that like Sam is lower class status.
Yes,
because he is the gardener, but he's not as well read as Frodo, but he grew up hearing all the stories about the elves and trolls and Bilbo's adventures when he was a kid.
He's a folklorist. He's not like I read this in a book. He's like, oh, I know these stories,
and he loves the stories.
He's like us.
He's very excited to see elves, which is so cute. We love Sam.
Because they go on the journey. They see the elves leaving to sail west. They're singing their little song. And then
in the book they like have dinner with them, but I understand why we don't do that here.
We don't have time. And they meet Merry and Pippin, the cousins, because they are
supposed to be the farthest away from home I'll have ever been.
I'm like, did he do a full radius? Like, he's like, if I pass the Scarecrow, Farmer Maggott's farm.
I guess I never thought about that, but like that was another thing we used to say growing up. This whole movie.
And so they run into Merry and Pippin, who were being Peter Rabbit and stealing stuff from the garden. And then they roll up. They're on the road, and Frodo's like, "We need to hide," and they hide from the ring wraith, who's like peeking over them, and all these bugs are climbing out.
There's a spider crawling on Pippin or something.
Well, because at first they're all looking at the mushrooms, and then
so I'm not going to get into a ton of the details of like, oh, this was different or this was cut, just the things that I found interesting that has changed. So what was cut was a lengthy sequence with a whimsical forest spirit named Tom Bombadil, who saves them from Grandmother Willow's ex-grandfather Willow, who tries to eat Merry and Pippin.
And Tom Bombadil is like, if you combined Walt Whitman and the Lorax, like basically, and also like he wears yellow boots. Doesn't he have yellow rain boots?
He has very colorful clothing.
Yes.
He's like whimsical. He's very
And
whimsical.
he's a wife guy. Like he loves his wife
He has a
Goldberry.
wife. He has a water spirit, the river's daughter, Goldberry. And then later they are almost killed by these ghosts, and Tom Bombadil helps them.
Mhm.
But while this is a smart editorial choice, right? Tom
Yeah.
Bombadil only comes up later where they're like, should we give the ring to him? And they're like, he's a little too whimsical. And like that's really it. Like he's not, it was a smart choice. But by cutting
Too much bi
Goldberry,
wife energy.
but by cutting Goldberry, this movie is guilty of one count of nymph erasure, which we will be talking about. This is one of my passion
Keeping track,
projects.
listeners. Keep track.
So, what is nymph erasure? It is when fantasy movies greatly reduce or remove nymphs from their storylines. We've talked about nymphs briefly in the Black Cauldron episode. They're nature spirits that are generally all female. And I think it's a sexism thing, which is weird because nymphs in many media were a male sexual fantasy that like are like these hot nature spirits. But in modern fantasy literature, I think it's a sexism thing when they're cut. Because they are not, if they are included, they're often depicted as seductresses who kill you, which was very like the sirens did that, but most nymphs didn't. Or like Amazon warriors or like victim, but I think in stories they're fun, playful, feminine embodiments of nature that enjoyed sex and romance and were
that
like,
was what we got to erase.
Yeah, erase. And they were generally good and fair. And so this presents nature as generally benevolent. Because even if because I remember doing a poem once for my speech about this guy who like saved a dryad, and then she's like, cool, let's date. And then she sent him a message via Bumblebee, and he was like, I don't like the bee movie. He was a jerk to the bee. And she was like, you don't respect the bees, like you can't get with me. If you want to be my lover,
You gotta get with my
bees.
Yeah. So, and because they're mystical creatures who are good and their abilities are not based in combat or violence, in the male dominated, combat dominated modern fantasy landscape, kind of born from Hollywood and especially this movie, there's no place for them because they are inherently lovers, not fighters.
Interesting.
And
Well,
so thus,
I feel like it makes sense narratively in order to like move on because we also skip the whole like real estate issue that is in the book of
yeah,
like
no,
Frodo trying to
it
sell his
makes
house.
100%. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
an interesting storyline.
Yeah.
I want like a selling sunset, selling the Shire. That's
Selling
what
the
I want.
Shire.
Honestly, there you go.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense to cut Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, but that is a nymph that was erased. And
As
I
a
will
kid, I was
speak up
upset
for
about
her.
it because I had a lot of feelings about Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, and the thing is, they also don't fit into Tolkien's like lore. They're kind of like weird outliers. Like, there's not
Well,
really an
because it's
explanation of what they were.
some of the beginning of the book, it feels a little bit more similar to The Hobbit, and then it kind of like starts to get darker. But like they're kind of in that realm of like Bjorn, like
Yeah, just like
those type of characters.
fun whimsy. But you know what? I will speak for every erased nymph.
I mean, it is also important because Tolkien knows that we will be upset at one point if we don't know what happens to the ponies, and he does mention that they go back and live with Tom Bombadil, and so that they're okay. The ponies were not harmed.
That is important. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little line about it. I'm like, thank you. You knew we would be worried.
Also cut Radagast the Brown loves animals. So there's just two wizards right now. So let's talk about the wizard storyline. We'll just kind of sometimes I'm gonna chop up storylines just so we do the whole thing at once. So there are just two wizards. So Gandalf, he goes to Saruman, the head of his order, and he's like, yeah, I looked in my Palantir, my like little crystal ball. I had a real talk with Sauron. Like, no way we're winning. Like, his army's too strong. We're all gonna die unless you join my MLM.
Multi-level Mordor scheme. You get a free Palantir for every 50 recruits. That's essentially what he is. I watching this, I was like, this is like when you go to like a teacher that you respect, and then you find out they've become a sellout to the district.
Yeah, Saruman is. It was cut from the book that he decided he was of many colors at this point. He had a rainbow cloak.
I remember this.
Yeah, and I'm like, they're like too gay. So I think that Saruman and Gandalf are both gay, but they've never dated, and Saruman is bitter about it. That's what I read. That's what I read.
A lot of people I think have said that. I also
Yeah,
think that like it's interesting because he the actor
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lloyd Christopher Lee Christopher
Yeah.
Lloyd different person.
Imagine
he
Saruman, Christopher Lloyd.
no, he auditioned for Gandalf. So
Yeah.
he
Really
makes
did.
yes,
Yeah.
he makes a lot more
Interesting.
sense as Saruman. I mean, he's also Count Dooku. Like he just that's
Yeah.
the type
And
of character.
Christopher Lee met Tolkien, I believe.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And he's like, you let the love for hobbits blind you. Like
He
you,
also tells them he's been smoking too much of their weed.
yeah. He's such a Karen. Uh,
Like
he,
Gandalf, you're off with these like little people smoking weed and partying.
I'm sitting alone in my tower, like a productive member of society. I actively choose the thing Rapunzel spent her whole life trying to get away from. And he's like, also the orcs captured Gollum, and he said Shire Baggins. So the 9 ring race, they've left Minas Morgul there in search for Frodo. So like, it's too late. Like we're doomed. Like we got to side with him. And so they do a wizard duel, and I like that there's no like flashy colors. It's just all
Right.
like
Motion.
yeah, which I think keeps it from aging.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's a
Yeah.
good point.
uh,
Well, I mean, there is a point where like Gandalf is spinning on the floor and I laughed very
I
hard.
mean,
yeah.
that's never been like I've
I
laughed
I
every
know.
time.
I was literally like, wow, I don't remember this, and this is my new favorite thing.
Well, when
He's
we were
just
watching it,
perpetually breakdancing, but not of his own accord.
and when he's on top of the tower, on top of Orthanc, when we're watching it, Patty's like, "How is he gonna get down? Like, what's happening?" And I'm like, there was a lot of watching it this time with her. Where I was just like, I can't tell. You have to watch the movie. Or she'd ask a question, I'd be like, Legolas will explain. Just listen.
Yeah. So Saruman's also destroying all the old trees. They're ripping them up with his
Mhm.
goblins.
That's how
And
you
then,
know he's bad.
yeah. And welcome to one of my favorite characters, the Moth. She's an icon. She shows up and Gandalf is like, "Hey, Ma,
Go
send a
here, go here,
message."
go here.
And then Moth is like, "Okay, I'm one of the most competent people in this society." And then like she does her job. Like she knows what she's doing. So Saruman is like indulging his bullying king with Gandalf, and then Gandalf leaps off and is picked up by a giant eagle. Also, I have
Named
beef.
Guahir.
Well, here I have beef with Burger King because when this movie came out, they had a lot of like toys and merch,
Hmm.
and Connor and Cait got Sam in their meals, and I got Saruman.
Which we didn't know how to
Wow.
pronounce his name,
I called
and
him
you said
Saruman.
Saruman. Also, Sam
Saruman.
looked like Kristoff. Like he did not look like Sam. He was very blonde. And he looked like Kristoff squatting.
Yeah. Uh, Meanwhile, the riders are chasing the hobbits around. They're going for the Buckleberry Ferry, which is a boat. As a kid, I saw this and was like, "Oh, they're going to see a ferry," and so
That's one of my favorite Cullen headcanons that I mention
So
every
like
time.
they get on the boat, they're being chased to get to the town. There's an old man at the gate. As a kid, I thought it was an old woman who was a fairy. I was
Yeah,
like,
so
"Oh,
I
that's
wrote
the
like
fairy
that's
there."
the Buckleberry Ferry, obviously.
There you go.
Also, he's the gatekeeper is very like he is kind of like a Shakespearean character. Like he just
Yeah.
has that vibe of like the guy that answers the gate. I was
Yeah.
also going to say though, when Gandalf is on the tower and what he says to Saruman, I feel like is important. Before he hops on the eagle, he's like, "There's only one Lord of the Ring, and he does not share power."
Mm.
Yeah.
So he's like, "You're not getting anything from this."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye.
DeSantis.
Got an
Yeah.
eagle.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's important. Yeah. And then so they get to Bree, the innkeeper, Mr. Butterbur is there. The book in Return of the King, there's a whole scene where they go back and like chat with him about events, and I'm like, who
Wait, what'd you say
decided
the barkeeper's name was?
Mr.
Butterbur?
Butterbur, Barlaman Butterbur. One of my friends wrote a rap about him.
Butterbur?
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
he's
that's so
he's
strange.
like a character that should be in Parks and Recreation. Like that's his energy.
But yeah, there's this whole scene where they're just like having like tea with him at the end, and I'm like, I didn't think I needed to revisit the
No,
barkeep.
not a character I wanted to see again.
But so he's like, I haven't seen Gandalf, and they're like, okay. Frodo gives a fake name, And
Under
Pippin,
hill.
yeah, because he lives under a hill. And then Pippin just outs him later, no paying attention. He's
Because
just
he had a pint of beer, and that's an important distinction. My friends and I used to quote, "It comes in pints. I'm getting one," but
I
like
remember that,
in
yeah.
Hobbiton in the Shire, you're not going to get a tall beer because you're a little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His
that's like
blood alcohol
6 beers for
content.
him. Yeah, he
Yeah.
should not be driving home or
I've had a
talking
whole
to
half
strangers.
already.
And so then they're all looking at Frodo and he falls and the ring falls on his finger. He goes invisible. He's in like ghost world. And then
Is there a name for that like world or that
It's like where the
piece of
wraiths are.
space?
it's like
Yeah.
the plane of spooky
Yeah.
times. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just
I-
curious if it had like a specific
I
name.
was also going to
think
say,
so.
like, this is the part in the book where he was singing his Hickory Dickory Dock extended edition, and then
Yeah.
he
Oh.
falls, and it fall like
Yeah. It's a musical number in the musical. Yeah.
there's a lot of songs in the book.
Yeah. There are.
Um,
I'm just gonna keep because it's just some small points.
Yeah.
We
It's gonna
meet
be a long
Strider.
episode.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna talk. So we meet Strider.
Dark and brooding, and I was like, "Ooh, yes, girl." Mhm.
The Witcher who like he
Exactly. Seriously. I mean, listen, Henry Cavill, gorgeous, but also Aragorn. Come
he's the
on.
foundation.
He is the well, I was gonna say he's the OG, but not really. But like dark brooding, we love him.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's a lot of people who headcanon Aragorn as a he him lesbian, and like I have one of my friends like basically did a find replace of the books where he makes Aragorn a lesbian.
I love that.
That is up there with the woman who made Harry Potter Christian. You're a Christian now, Harry.
But I feel
Oh
like
my God.
lesbian Aragorn is a better choice.
I mean, no, just do it. Yeah, I believe in the free reign of fan fiction. Do whatever makes you happy, as you know, not within reason, of course, but you know,
Aragorn is
enjoy.
another character I feel like I related to more now
Mm,
as an adult than I did as a kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like he always was cool, but I'm like, there's things that I can identify with now.
Yeah. Now you're like, I am cool.
Yeah, there you go.
So Strider grabs them and he's like, you need to keep a low profile. And then the hobbits
Mr.
are like
Underhill.
Mr. Underhill. The hobbits are like, oh, give them back. They have like a chair.
I'll have you, Longshanks. Like this is where like so much characterization of Sam of like if something
Yes.
happens to Frodo, he will be there. He
Fist.
is
Fist to
yeah.
cuff. Not even a weapon.
Like-
He's just like, he's ready.
He's ready to fight anyone or anything, and this
Yeah.
is why we love him.
Yeah.
Dedication.
And he's like, you need to hide. And so the ring wraith come, they kill the fairy, and they squish
Smash.
him. And then they go to their beds, and it's like we have the shots of them sleeping, and they stab
cut,
with
cut back and forth between them sleeping like IRL and then this trap of the stabbing of the pillows, lots of feathers everywhere. And like then they're like, wait a second, there's no blood, there's no noises happening.
Scream.
Yeah.
Well, also like I was just like because Maddie was like, "Oh no, what's gonna happen?" I was like, "They made a hay boy," because in the Weird Al movie, there's like a plot line of making a hay boy to like sneak out of the house.
I thought the ring wraiths were girls as well when I saw this movie.
Cullen is
Because-
like gender diversity. In,
I'm
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
I'm forcing it
these
in the
Feels
movie.
like I'm looking for women wherever I can find them.
to be fair,
Even if they're
these
hooded
movies,
ghosts.
Though I mean, my top note for this movie is I need a Lindsay, I need a Disney princess, and I think the sequel will deliver.
Eowyn. I mean, her name is even similar.
So they go with Aragorn, and Frodo's like, I think we can trust him because he looks foul and he feels fair. Someone who's evil would look fair but feel foul. And I was like a blonde lady on Fox News.
Oh my gosh,
Like
that's
Candace
so
Cameron
true.
Bure. Yeah.
I mean, I wrote down Macbeth reference number one because like there's a lot of elements that I feel like I've noticed probably because I've just finished this is my fourth or fifth time teaching Macbeth. I can't remember. There's a lot of like Shakespeare elements in this mythology, and I feel like Tolkien did that on purpose.
Yeah.
You get that even more in the next couple movies.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Trees.
So they go to this Weathertop, this ruin, and they're making bacon, and their race smell the bacon. And so they're
Nice
they nice
tomatoes and nice crispy bacon. Put it out, you fools! Put it out. Oh, that's nice. Ashes in my tomatoes. Another line that I quote often.
So the race are just climbing up, and the hobbits are like, I guess we're fighting them, which I love about these hobbits. They're like,
Oh yeah,
okay.
Sam is ready to go head to head with the Witch King.
They're like
Again, we
down to
love him.
clown. Yeah. And Frodo can't resist the urge to put the ring on. He goes in the
Okay,
ghost
the other thing
plane.
too is like that I always say is because around the time that these movies came out, there are always people who be like, Frodo's such a wimp. He's always dropping the sword. He's always going to put on the ring. And I'm like, yeah, you tried being a little guy who's like carrying an evil weapon of mass destruction where people are constantly tempting you to put it on and they also want to kill you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's also like I definitely sympathize with it more now, and also just as a storytelling device, putting Frodo in danger instantly raises the stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he and I also feel like the reason that a lot of that happened, and I've had conversations with people about this, is it's like it's a little bit sexism because it's like, oh wow, he can't be a damsel in distress because he's a guy, and then there's
Right.
it's also like homophobic
Yeah.
because it's like anytime he shows a sign of weakness, then it's like, oh, like
Yeah.
he has to be rescued, and no, I don't
Which
stand
I'm
for
like,
that nonsense.
they're all normal people with like no special abilities trying to
Yeah,
like
because
live
he
this
grew up in the
adventure.
Shire. He grew up in a really like privileged setting.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course he doesn't have some of these skills. Like to be able
He's
to
a
like
little
sword
boy
fight and stuff.
who read inside. Like he's very
Yeah.
pale.
Or
Yeah.
Like
underneath a tree.
Underneath a
yeah.
tree.
That's why he's still pale, no sun.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, that's really interesting that's like, and it's probably just because like he's coded as male.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's
But
mean-
like he looks very feminine in this movie.
yeah, that's why it's like
Probably why I was just like I had a big crush on Frodo in middle school.
yeah, that's so interesting.
Well, I think it's also like when we in Black Cauldron, we talked about how some of the advantage, like comparing old and new Disney, is that these characters don't have special abilities. They're just like kind of helpless idiots, and the bad guys are so much stronger than them.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's what makes a lot of movies strong. And I think that's some of the strength of this movie is that they're like in over their heads. They're not
Mhm.
super powered.
Yeah, because
'Cause
I mean,
even
like, you can put yourself in that situation as a human being. It's like, oh, well, I would be Frodo.
yeah, and I think that's like you have to have a window into the story.
Yes.
And that's what the
And
hobbits are. And like even Aragorn, like he doesn't have special abilities. He just knows how to knows the road and like
Yeah.
yeah.
would go on to be in the movie The Road. Um,
True.
But yeah,
Yes,
you
he
know,
would.
compared to the superhero genre,
yeah.
where
Right.
everyone's super powered, so they stab him. It's with the Morgul blade. This is the worst injury on the book since a frozen heart. Fatal. And then so Aragorn comes in with his fire. He burn baby burn into Disco Inferno. He's burning up these wraiths. And
I always love the one that's like, and then like falls off and looks very much like the Ghost of Christmas Future.
yeah. But Frodo's gonna turn into a wraith from the injury. So he's like, okay, we need to. They're like at where Bilbo's trolls were, and Sam's like, look, the trolls from the story. Frodo,
I
pay
also the
attention.
way that was filmed, I just thought of like one of those POV TikToks, like POV, like you got stabbed by a Morgul blade and your boyfriend's trying to cheer you up.
Lord of the Rings told entirely as POV TikToks.
But I also like that part where Aragorn is like, okay, we need
Atheros.
yeah,
And
which is
he's
King
like,
Spoil.
what is
Oh, it's a
that?
weed. And then he knows that Sam can find it. He's like, we're gonna leave these two dinguses to just kind of like hold down the fort here. Sam will know what to do.
Yeah, because Sam knows plants. So when he uses the
like
common name, he knows. Yeah.
yeah, because like Aragorn, that's how you know he's a good leader because he sees people's strengths. And
Yeah.
like there are certain students who I'll be like, hey, can you help pass this out? And there's other kids who it's like, nope, you're not gonna do that right now.
Yeah. Sam has the nature skill on his D&D sheet.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they help with the wound, and but it's like he really needs elves or an act of true love, but whatever. And then so Arwen shows up, replacing an elf named Glorfindel.
Glorfindel.
That's fine. you
I
know,
also think it's fine.
she
Also, we
needed
get the
something to do
scene,
in this
what's
movie.
this? The ranger caught off his guard, which is like
Yeah.
a very
Instant
hot scene.
roast. So, because she comes in roasting him, I was like, oh, I love them. I ship them so hard.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you know, Glorfindel got to be in the Battle for Middle Earth 2 video game, so he's okay. So, but she's all like radiant, and like Frodo's like seeing the light, and it's like he sees her differently than like how she's appearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that also confused me this time. I'm glad I got that clarified because I was like, wait, oh, he's just hallucinating. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, he thinks he's in an Enya music video. Everyone else is not.
Yeah. Very strong Enya Celtic woman energy in this
Yes.
franchise. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I feel
Uh,
like that was like coming out around the same time because like there's a lot of like Ren Fair adjacent type stuff.
yeah. And so she's like, I'm the fastest rider here. I'm gonna take him to Rivendell. So she's on the horse, she's running. This is one of my favorite chase scenes in cinema.
Mhm.
Like the action sequences in this movie are so good. You know, they remind you like how good an action sequence can be because they are right on her tail and she's like
Yeah.
dipping around trees. It's not just like her chasing, they slowly get closer. It's like she's maneuvering.
And then
they're
she
like,
gets her sexy scratch.
sexy.
Sexy
Arwen,
scratch TM.
she loves a sexy scratch. She loves a sexy cry with a single tear. She's here to serve looks, not the Dark Lord. That's the Real Housewives of Middle Earth intro. So then she goes to the water, and the Wraiths are scared of water,
Because they
and
also did not go into the water when they get on the ferry.
yeah,
That was something I explained, and Maddie was like, "Why?" And she's like, and I was like, "Because they're evil, obviously."
yeah, they don't like water. I was gonna say they're scared of La Llorona, but so she summons the water horses. That's she's like, oh, you hate water, and then because she's like, if you want him, come and get him. And then they're like, okay, and then she summons the river, washes them away. And then Frodo's failing, and she's like, no, you've come so far. And she summons her dad in like this Canva Pro screen. Like I could have edited this, but you know what? That was probably much harder to do in 2001 when this came out.
Yeah, you have Canva
Yeah.
to do it for you.
Yeah, so it's like this white floating thing, and she's like, heal him. And then he wakes
Is
up
it
in
happy
the bed.
low opacity Elrond Day to all who celebrate?
Yeah.
That used to be my Twitter background for a while, just because like why not?
Frodo wakes up in Rivendell
And
with
that's the end of the movie.
yeah, he escaped the ring race, and the ring race are dead. They can't get the ring now, so
That's it. Did we talk about that before we start recording?
oh,
Or
that you
was-
thought
Yeah, so just to explain the joke, I think I got mixed up the very like one of the last scenes in Return of the King with this scene where he wakes up and I was like, wait, the movie's over? So yeah, but it's not.
no, I think we've made it
October the
maybe halfway.
24th.
It's still before the halfway point. Still, like even at this point, we haven't quite hit halfway. And I was baffled by that.
So he wakes up in Rivendell with Gandalf. Sam has been by his side, but Sam is like, "You're better now. Let's go." Frodo's like, "Did you
Want
want
to
to
hear
see
a fun
that?"
fact, Cullen, that I
Yeah.
think you'll really appreciate?
Yeah.
This is how uncultured I am. Okay. When Riverdale first came out,
Oh no.
do I have to finish?
No,
You
please
thought
do.
you're like, wait, isn't that where the elves live in Lord of the Rings?
I was like, oh, they made like a show on the CW. I thought the
I mean,
elves were the
To
Rings.
be
Honestly,
fair,
I'd watch
I would
it.
watch
I
that.
know,
Yeah.
you would. So that's why I wanted
CW
to tell you.
elves.
Come on.
That's an embarrassing story that I knew like only these two people would embrace me for.
You know,
Also,
I almost would rather I wish every like network came out with the Lord of the Rings show. So we got the Amazon ones, but I want to see like the CW take.
Mhm.
again,
I want to
selling
see
Hobbiton.
selling
Yes.
Hobbiton. Like I want a full like I want like sexy teen elves fighting the Dark Lord Morgoth. You know, like so yeah, so Sam is like, okay, I saw the elves. Let's get out of here. Like we did it.
When
Movie's
I was
over.
a kid, I remember thinking like, yeah, they should just go home.
Yeah. they're like, we contributed enough to this group project. Like,
Yeah.
and so he sees Bilbo, who got old because he doesn't have the ring. And he asked about the ring, and Frodo's like, whatever. And then so Elrond and Gandalf are talking about, like, the elves are the boomers right now. They're retiring with the last of the social security, and no one else is gonna get any. That's like, if
I
you're gonna
also
sail to the west, like, sorry
after
guys.
seeing like happy young Elrond in Rings of Power, watching this Elrond, I was like, this Elrond has seen some shit and he is sick of it.
Yeah.
He was
That's
there 3,000 years ago, Gandalf.
yeah, that's the vibe of the elves in Lord of the Rings. Is like, oh, we've seen too
They're
much.
so tired.
Yeah,
Like not
and
all of them, but like Elrond especially.
yeah,
He's
I-
just like, I am just trying to like get by so I can take my vacation.
yeah.
Like
He's like, I'm trying to retire. Like, someone
Yeah.
else needs to do this. And he's like, you can't trust the dwarves. They're super greedy. And Gandalf is like, okay, men, humans. And Elrond is like, he like throws them in his mouth. He's like, humans. He's like,
Gross.
I was
well, because he
there.
says men are weak. And I remember watching this with my friends and I would always be like, but women are strong. I was a goof.
And so
Was not.
only in the past, yes.
Only.
And
Yeah,
so
you're Aragorn now. You're cool.
yeah, Pippin
Cool.
days in the past. So he's like, I was there 10,000 years ago. That's my Titanic. It's been 84
For
years.
years.
That's
It's
my
like that, and also like, do not speak to me as a deep magic witch.
yeah. And so he's like, he was like, throw it into the fire, and Isildur was like, no. And I was like, you should have literally just thrown Isildur into the fire.
Okay, to be fair, in
That's
the
murder.
book,
So yeah.
he puts on the ring and they can't find him, but he's just like, no, dramatically walks away, and then he's like, no, like it a
Yeah. And he's like,
little bit of cheese.
the blood of Numenor growing thin. And I'm like, that's a little yikes. But then I'm like, you know what? When modern politicians are demanding my absolute loyalty, I'm like, do you have the blood of Numenor? Or even, I don't know, like St. Louis? No? Why do you expect that devotion? Embarrassing. And so there's the council. It's like the biggest Zoom meeting ever.
This could have been an email.
I feel Elrond is also, when he starts the council, he's just like, all right, we're here. It's like he's just trying to get through like this last corporate meeting.
No,
Yep.
Elrond is the most hired HR manager of Middle Earth.
Mhm.
Yeah. Everyone like other people seem genuinely delighted to be there because like Legolas is just like, I'm here.
He's a young
I'm in a
elf. He's a little
commercial for like
whippersnapper.
shampoo, L'Oreal.
He's
with
like,
Legolas.
he's trying to seduce Katy Perry. He's like,
Fun
he
fact
wants
though,
that teenage
Orlando
dream
Bloom
money.
got this job 2 days after graduating college.
Oh shit. That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. Wild. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of wild things about the casting in this film.
So before the council, Boromir, he's the son of the Steward of Gondor.
Scene Bean.
Scene Bean. He's like a regent. He's the
Yeah.
heir to the regency.
And which is like as I explained, this is like where the really Catholic part comes in. Because they're like the steward, which is like what the Pope is.
Right.
Until
Aragorn is
Jesus comes
Jesus.
back. Yes, Aragorn's
Oh.
Jesus, and he's like, I'm not giving my
Right.
job to Jesus. Ugh. Like
To the
he
left
hates.
behind, yeah.
Yeah, because he like looks at him across the council, just like, I hate you. Like, and
Yeah.
this begins their enemies to lovers bro ship.
Yeah. And Boromir pricks himself on that broken sword, and
Aragorn's just
That
like
part,
watching
even though I
him.
know he's gonna cut himself, I'm like, he's gonna cut himself.
he's like,
And
oh, it's still
Aragorn's
sharp.
just like, okay, first of all, there's like a little bit of light in this room because it's nighttime, and Aragorn's like, yes, here I am, just like poring over this book.
He's
in
doing
a
it
very
very
little light.
random.
And
So
also,
he's like
like
watching.
his shirt in that scene is so soft, and I want it. Like,
Yes. It's like velvety.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, they have
I want to
such...
touch it and see the streaks go up and down. Boop, boop, boop.
So Arwen is like, hey, just because you have some shitty ancestors doesn't mean you have to be shitty. And she takes him to Sexy Time Bridge and is like, remember what I told you? And this is where my dad
To
would always
shave.
say, to shave. Yes. And she's like, I'm going to give you my immortality. This necklace is a symbol of my immortality and my place out west. I'm giving it to you. And Aragorn's like, that's a big ask. And she's like, I give it freely. This is
Because
my
she's like, I
choice.
get to give it to who I want. Because he's like, you can't do this, and she's like, you can't tell me what to do. And I
Yeah,
really
she's
like
like,
her.
I can give this, I have a right to give you this, and also my heart. And I was like, oh, they're so romantic. I love them.
I also
Yeah.
like, so one of the big changes from Aragorn in the book versus the movie is in the book, he's like, all right, reforge that sword. I'm gonna be king. Let's get this on with. And which is not a very compelling character
Right.
in a book or in a film. And so like here that he's like, I'm conflicted because I have seen some people do some bad stuff and I
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yeah.
like them. And so like you understand him more. And I think it's a more interesting character choice than to just have him be like, cool, sign me up, ready to
That's
be king.
interesting. Yeah. I don't
Most
think he would be as successful.
no. And
No.
most fantasy royals, they're supposed to be likable, they don't want power. Or they're like are
Right.
uncertain about
They're
taking
they're or
power.
they're what's the word? Like they're
Hesitant.
resistant. Yeah,
Yeah.
hesitant to it. They're like, oh, if I have to, like
Yeah.
sincerely like feeling that way.
Yeah. And that's what George R. Martin said. Well, we don't know what Aragorn's tax policy is, which I don't know if I know anyone's tax policy in Game of Thrones, other than maybe Marjorie, who I think should have won. But
Yeah, but
I
then they
also feel
killed her.
like a lot of the way that Aragorn is as well what a transition is because of the way Viggo Mortensen plays him. This is the movie
yeah.
where he found out he was a horse girl. Like,
Yeah. So time for the Zoom meeting. So we got Boromir, Strider, Frodo, Gandalf.
So okay, really quick. So when Boromir is like with the sword and Aragorn's like, "What you doing, bro?" He doesn't know who Aragorn is,
no.
right? Okay. Okay,
He's like, you're just a
interesting.
ranger. Yeah.
Okay,
Like
okay, okay.
He's like,
Aragorn
you're a
very much
ranger. I
like
don't like that D&D class.
he's like
I
low
was like,
key does
"Excuse
not
me, my tiefling ranger. Thank you."
he doesn't want people to know.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like
Okay, makes
it's like
sense.
awkward. It's like I don't tell you I'm the true heir. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so we got Boromir, Strider, Frodo, Gandalf, and then Legolas. Legolas is the Prince of Mirkwood. That's
His
like
dad's Thranduil the Fabulous.
but Mirkwood is like the hillbilly elves. It's
Hmm.
Oh,
like the lowest
interesting.
rung of elves. Yeah. And then like I think Rivendell right now is like the highfalutin elves.
I thought
Uh,
also that Thranduil didn't necessarily want Legolas to go.
yeah, Thranduil is a little more morally ambiguous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he and Legolas is like, sorry, Dad, gonna go off on this quest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you'll be the
Gimli,
leftist in our family.
he's the leftist. Yeah,
He's
Gimli
like,
is
oh, by the way, I have a dwarf boyfriend now.
Yeah, exactly.
Gimli, son of Gloin, is there. So the ring is sowing chaos in the meeting, right? Like
Hmm.
and Boromir's like, I want to use it to defend Gondor, and
Yeah, he's like,
Aragorn,
it's a
It's a gift.
gift. Yeah.
yeah, like we could use the power. I'm like, what are you gonna do with that ring? Just turn invisible? Like that's all you know how
Well,
to
the
do
other
with it.
thing that I understand, like, I feel like I have a little bit more sympathy for Boromir on this rewatch, is because like he's lived on the borders of Mordor his whole life and like seen his people struggle, and
Yeah,
he will do anything to try and give his family and his people a better life. So like you can kind of, it's
yeah,
like a
Yeah.
kid who's been on the war front versus like
yeah,
someone who like, we live in Rivendell. Have we seen pain? I don't know.
Yeah, he's
yeah.
literally like, my people have sacrificed their lives so much
So
for you
you can
guys
all
to
live
sit in
in.
your pompous castles and your
Yeah,
beautiful waterfalls. And I was like, go off, Boromir. Yes.
yeah.
But
I
also, we don't consider the ring a gift. Okay.
like
Slapping his wrist a little bit.
yeah, and then he's like Aragorn is like no, and then Boromir's like you don't know what you're talking about, and Legolas is like actually he's your king. He's
Yeah.
Aragorn,
I
son
love
of
him
Arathorn.
being a hype man for Aragorn that he did
I
not ask
literally,
for.
I'm sitting here watching this movie by myself. The only audience I have is my dog and my cat. And I was like, Legolas would totally suck his dick.
Yeah,
He's
he's
so
like
eger to do that.
He's like the three girls in Beauty and the Beast who are like, oh, his son.
yeah, because Aragorn's like don't that's awkward, and he's like no, you're the king, and then Boromir's like sorry, I prefer
Yeah,
dictatorships,
he's
not
like,
monarchies.
yeah, he's like, you're the king. I will get on my knees for you.
uh
Well, I also feel like Boromir and Aragorn meeting this way is like very Paris and Rory when Rory comes to Shilton. Because Boromir's like, I know what I'm doing. We gotta take care of this. And then he's like, "Ah, why not? Like he's Like,
Yeah.
good at things too? What?
Boromir's like, I'm supposed to be the top representative of men.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Because like there's
America's
like
next top, or Middle Earth's next top man.
Yeah.
yeah, because they're like they have like small groups of like representatives from the different races. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm the
Elrond
top
hands his
man.
picture back. You're not in the running.
Sorry.
We're rooting for you.
We were rooting for you. We were all rooting. Actually, we were,
They
you
were.
know, a little bit.
Yeah. So Gandalf, when they're fighting, he just chants the Mordor speak, and Elrond is like, how dare you in my good elf home, my good
Elrond's
Christian home.
face has so many reactions. He's just like, Gandalf, why do you got to be that guy? Like, because
Yeah.
Gandalf says, because you have to say it in all of the realms because we shouldn't be afraid to do
Well, because
that.
he's like, that language will be heard everywhere if we don't stop it.
Hmm.
And then Gimli's like, well, then let's destroy it. He like throws this axe, it breaks. Our Gimli action figure came with that little stand.
Yeah,
of
the broken
ring
axe.
and the
And
broken
then just the
axe.
little ring in the middle. It's like there's always that one kid who's like, all right, let's just break it, see
Yeah.
what happens.
You
But
know, you
what?
need an
Trial and
experimenter
error.
like that. Yep. You
Yes.
need someone who experiments, who's willing to
Yeah.
just go for it.
Gandalf is like, you have to go to Mount Doom. And so then they're like, okay, who's gonna take it? They're fighting. Boromir is the one does not simply meme.
Yeah.
One does
One
not
does
simply
not
walk
simply walk into Mordor, which
He's
I
like, you
think
can't do this with 10,000 men.
he's like with 10,000 men you could not do this. And I had made a meme about like one does not simply walk into High Tops, which is a bar in WeHo, and I was like, still stands. You could not do this with 10,000 men.
Yeah. And the elves and dwarves are all kind of being racist. And then Frodo is like, I want the arguing to stop. So he agrees to a life-altering quest to end an uncomfortable work meeting and stop
Which is the
conflict.
most Hobbit energy.
I'm like, relatable. That's the most relatable Frodo scene to me. He's like,
I mean,
"Ugh."
me too. Yeah, and he's just like, but I don't know the way. And then and everyone is ready to be like, all right, we'll help you.
Yeah,
But
Gandalf.
Oh, I also love how Sam comes out of the bushes and is like, "Ha, I'm going with you too."
He just loves, he's an eavesdropper. He he knows how to hide in a bush and to overhear a conversation.
He could be on Downton Abbey.
Yes. So Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Boromir, and Gandalf join. Merry and Pippin run out, and they're like, "We're gonna join too. We don't know where we're going." And
Elrond is like, where are these children coming from?
Yeah, Elrond's face of like, what the heck?
Why are we
Like,
letting the children run in the house?
but he's like, you know what? You don't even know what you're agreeing to, but sure, go on the quest. I love symmetry. 9 of them, 9 of you. Go on a quest, babes.
yeah. Also, Pippin is like that kid who signs up for the Peace Corps during like a quad event and has no idea what he's getting into.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he's like, I'm here for the mission quest thing. You need someone with my intelligence.
And he's like, that rules you out, Pip.
So Bilbo gives Frodo his mithril shirt, has a Gollum moment.
That is a puppet. Fun fact. It was not fully CGI. They built a puppet for that split second of him making that
Really?
face.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
A lot of people who from What a Workshop, like I want to say like had previously worked with Jim Henson, like a lot of special effects stuff became a thing because of this film.
Yeah. This film used a lot of practical effects, and it shows.
I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, the orcs, they and the other versions of them holds up. Like those things are scary.
So they're leaving. Frodo is like, is Mordor right or left?
That's when I made the joke. He's got to ask his GPS, Gandalf positioning system.
Great quality. So then they're like play fighting. Like Boromir is play fighting with Merry and Pippin.
I love this scene.
Boromir loves
foreshadowing as well. Like, because Boromir is an older brother, so like he's like, I can be an older brother here. I see a role for myself, and so good.
Yeah, so heartwarming, and also like, so Sam and Frodo don't really get in on the action, which I find to be interesting.
They're a little more solemn, and I think
they're like, you know what, we're gonna let them fight for us a little bit.
Well, because Sam's usually making dinner.
Yeah,
true.
And it's also hinting, it's showing us, and I think I finally really understood it in this watch, how the ring is just essentially trying to corrupt them one by one. That there's nothing inherently evil about Boromir.
Right.
He's just the easiest to corrupt. He's not bad. He's just like the least good.
Yeah. Well, maybe not even just the least good, but the fact that he views the ring as a gift, that it is
Yeah.
something he can use to save his people. I wouldn't say it's
Yeah.
that's
It's
why
like
he's least, that's why
he
he's the
has
most corruptible, because he
an
sees a
in.
potential.
Yeah.
He sees
Mhm.
a potential that
Because like,
other
what's
people
Pippin
aren't
gonna do with
seeing.
the ring? Like, he has no
Nothing.
desire.
He's gonna get 11sies. He's gonna get afternoon tea. We didn't even talk about that.
Oh yeah, he's like, because Strider doesn't know about all their meals.
Yeah, he knows about supper,
Don't think
right?
he knows about those.
I highly doubt it.
He's like, I
Uh,
wouldn't count on it. Then he throws him the apple. Because if you notice, Mary is almost always eating an apple.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He's just flexing on Snow White all the time.
Because he goes like this.
Crunch. So then Legolas is like, ooh, and so instead of just saying Saruman sent crows, it's Creevane from Dunland. Okay.
Legolas's job in this movie is to point things out and to smell things and hear things. And he's
his
just probably an
elf
apple.
senses.
But I wrote a note, he's Lego Lassie, because it's like, what is it? Timmy's stuck in the well. Like he always is
Pointed
like,
tail, pointed nose.
yeah, he's like, look, crows.
So they let Saruman know about the Fellowship. Meanwhile, he's making an army by breeding men and orcs in slime pits, making the Uruk-hai who can walk in the sun.
So
And
he
that's
makes Lurtz the orc queen.
Orc queen. Yes, I thought Lurtz was a woman when I saw this movie as a kid, and that
He
he
does
was
have
the orc
Ariana
queen.
Grande's hairstyle.
Yeah,
And
he's an
I did see a meme about
Aryaneer,
that.
and I believe that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was just adding female representation because I was like, there needs to
Wherever
be
you
more of a
can find
balance.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is a lot of conflicting origin stories for the orcs in Tolkien's mythos. And so one of them was that they were made from slime. So this is going with the slime theory. There are no orc women. They are reproduced asexually.
Because isn't the other theory that like they were
Elves.
mutilated
tortured,
elves?
Yeah.
They have that with I forget his name in the Rings of Power. He has an actual name, but I call him Orc Daddy.
Okay.
Like you know what I'm talking about? The guy who's like trying to like build stuff for the orcs.
Yeah. So they go through the mountains and it's real snowy. Frodo drops the ring. Boromir picks it up. Tension. Legolas
Such
is
a
like,
little thing.
yeah. Legolas is like, I hear a fell voice on the air, and it's Saruman.
Legolas is always like, can I make this poetic AF? I think I will.
Yeah.
I mean, in the book, he says like, aye, aye, a Balrog approaches. So, like,
there's a more romantic way to say that.
Yeah. Saruman is like, you don't want to go to Moria because the dwarves delve too greedily and too deep. So he's making a snowstorm. And because I watched this with subtitles, I learned that he's speaking Quenya,
which is the High Elvish.
And Gandalf is speaking Sindarin, which is Gray Elvish.
Interesting.
Like Hillbilly Elvish.
Fun fact. Okay, that is really cool to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even had the CC on it. I didn't catch that.
Yeah. Saruman.
Well, if you don't know the difference,
all Elvish sounds the same to me. I'm sorry.
Racist.
I tried to teach myself Elvish when I was a kid.
I think doesn't Duolingo have it?
Does it?
Or
I just was using the appendixes.
Or
well, it's not a complete language.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, neither is like what is it? Valyrian, High Valyrian. I think that maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because I knew they had a fantasy language on the app.
So Saruman is like the elitist and Gandalf is like an ethnographer. So Boromir is like, the hobbits are gonna die. This will be the death of the hobbits. They have to go to the Gap.
It doesn't snow in the Shire either.
Yeah. So they have to
yeah, so they're still not wearing shoes. Is there a reason why they don't wear shoes at all?
Because their feet are like
tough.
Yeah, and it's basically
if they don't
like
do snow, then their feet aren't used to it, right?
Yeah, because
plot hole.
The Shire is basically kind of like Ireland or Great Britain, where it doesn't snow that often.
Right.
Yeah, it snows. It's not like we've never seen snow before, but it's not going to be like heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was like, there's not enough hair on those feet.
No, their feet are cold. Yeah. So Gimli's like, we got to go to the mines of Moria for my cousin Balin. Boromir's like, we got to go through the Gap of Rohan. Like, it's too close to Isengard. And Gandalf is like, Frodo, pick.
Yeah, let this emotionally compromised, cold-footed little boy pick for us.
And he's
like, there's a lot of Frodo just looking nervous and like making decisions, and like that was very appealing to 12-year-old me. I'm like, yeah, okay, like let Frodo decide.
So like, let's go to the mines of Moria. So they go and there's a password and it's speak friend and enter. And Gandalf doesn't know it, and Frodo's later like, what's the elvish word for friend? I'm like, why is it
Melon.
elvish? The dwarves don't like the elves.
Yeah,
But-
I thought that was weird.
But they were friends when Khazad-dûm was built because Khazad-dûm and
Yes.
Eregion. Yeah.
Because,
And
well,
so,
in Rings of Power, Elrond is their bro.
Yeah.
so they asked the elves to create their security system.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're the Simply Safe of Middle Earth.
Mhm.
Yes.
The word is melon, and I'm like, the password should be something
Melon.
you can slap at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
You know how I feel about slapping melons. That's for the glee booties.
It is, yeah. It's how you can tell if they're ripe enough.
Someone, I want to say, was it a meme or was I like talking to Brittany about this? Like, that tattoo idea, speak friend and enter, is a tramp stamp.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Also, this part where Merry and Pippin are throwing the rocks in the water and Aragorn is like, no. I'm like, this is how I feel whenever I am chaperoning a field trip. I'm like,
Yep.
just don't.
But I would do that if I was bored. I would just throw the rocks in the water.
I'd be skipping the
Their
rocks.
rock
Yeah.
throwing skills come in handy later.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. So they let Bill the Pony go. Aragorn is like, he'll get home, and I'm like, okay.
He goes to Tom Bombadil. That is canon.
I love this moment because Aragorn doesn't like shame Sam for like being sad or like scared for this animal. And I was like, I love this. It's just
Yeah.
like a small moment of like compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Also, he's a horse girl, so he understands.
You're right.
No, but like that's the nice thing about this franchise is the tough guys aren't like needlessly mean. It's the fact that you can be tough and tender at the same time. It's
Yeah,
not
like
a show.
even
They're-
later, Boromir is the same way. Like,
yeah. They're like, it's okay to like have feelings, and that doesn't mean you aren't brave or strong, you know?
yes.
Part of me wonders if like it's the acting, but also like most of the script was written by women.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they go in to the Moria. They realize most of the dwarves are dead. It's not a hall, it's a tomb. Because Gimli's like, we're gonna get a great welcome. And it's like, you have not talked to your cousin in a minute.
I know. I'm like, did he not like
Clearly.
send any letters? That's something that I like am always just like, have we like
He's like, he never answers any of my letters, but you know what?
But he's totally fine.
He's fine, yeah. So, but they try and leave, and a water monster is attacking, and it's trying to get Frodo, probably because of the ring. And so they have
because
to
the
go
ring
through the
attracts
mines.
anything evil
Yeah.
because like it will try and manipulate like the squid guy could bring the ring to Sauron somehow.
Yeah. Hi, Tam. And then
She's here.
she's
Her
here.
pet.
So they go to the cave. They see all the mithril that they mine. Gandalf is like, Bilbo has a shirt of that worth more than the Shire, and I'm like, wow, I hate that. Frodo is like, Gollum is following us, and he's like, it's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance, because Gandalf is like, he hates himself and the ring, and he loves himself in the ring, and Frodo's like, should have killed him, and Gandalf is like, it was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? Do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends. My heart tells me that Gollum has some part to play yet, for good or ill. Before this is over, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many.
Which is like, so good.
Such a good.
Oh, go ahead.
He's like, you don't get to decide who lives and who dies.
Which is a great line. It's very important. I don't remember if I wrote this down, but I think that's also like another Macbeth reference.
Yeah.
But because Macbeth is like, I'm going to choose when somebody dies. And there is a part about like, is it for good or for ill? Yeah.
Well, and the fact that Bilbo's compassion was going to have a multi-generational impact. Yeah. Right, like for good or for like, he's like, there's so much potential. And when Frodo's like, I wish the ring had never come to me, he's like, so does everyone who sees that, who's like in a tough time. Like, you don't get to decide, and we have to decide what to do at the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil. Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you're also meant to have it, and that is an encouraging thought. So Cait just showed to the
Maddie made this for me.
Quote.
All we have to decide is what to do at the time that is given to us, which is a great quote.
Yeah, and it's also like there's so much active evil in this world, and
Mhm.
Gandalf is saying that there's also good. It's like
Yeah.
subtle, but like you were meant to find this ring, you know?
And it's almost like I'm upset that I have generational trauma that has been handed to me by my uncle, but he's like, but you also have the fact that like he spared this person's life. That is around too.
Yeah. Uh, so he follows his nose. He says, always, Meriadoc, always follow your nose.
Which I always think of Toucan Sam in the Fruit Loops commercial from around this time. Because one of the times watching it, one of my friends said that because she's like, I can't say it to you because then you won't unhear it. And I'm like, tell it to me anyway. Because if you tell me that you can't tell me something that I want to know because I'm 12 or 13. So that's what I always
Yeah.
think of now.
So they see Balin's tomb. Gimli is wailing. Gandalf is like, okay, Pippin, hold my staff and hat. I need to read this book from this
Okay,
guy.
also, as a teacher, I'm like, he gives Pippin a job because you give a job and something to hold to the kid who is going to cause trouble by touching something.
Yeah.
So Gandalf is like, okay, you're gonna hold these and you won't touch anything, hopefully, while I read this book.
And he's like reading it and the writing is trailing off and it's basically like there's no way out. Like we're trapped.
Also, my other question is, did they build a tomb while they were being attacked, or he died previously?
I don't know. Maybe they built
I've
a
had
tomb
this
because
is
he was their king. Maybe they had it
yeah,
ready.
yeah.
Oh, that's not how I read that at all. What you're talking about when they walk in and Boromir's like, this
Yeah.
is actually a tomb?
Yeah.
I think it's
No, we're talking about the actual tomb
Oh,
for Balin in that room.
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Never
Yeah.
mind.
And so Pippin touches the skeleton and it goes down and the whole fucking well is like the chains and the bucket, it's banging, and they're like,
Great.
great, thanks. Relatable. That would be me on this quest.
That's why he's like, hold this, so then you won't touch anything.
And the goblins are marching. Memeable Scene Bean is like, they have a cave troll.
I love that line. Like his delivery, so good.
He's
Just
like,
like
he's a bit of a fixer-upper.
well, the way he says like have a cave troll as if it's just like just another Tuesday, gotta deal
Just
with
another
this.
Tuesday, trolls and their kidnapping of reindeer boys. And so get this action sequence. They fight the troll and the goblins. Frodo gets stabbed.
This
But
is
the
also
mithril
where
saves him.
Sam Flynn Rider who he starts fighting with his frying pan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rapunzel and Flynn shaking.
I think I'm getting the hang of this.
And so they Frodo's alive, but there are more goblins coming. They get surrounded and they would probably die. But then the Balrog appears, and Boromir is like, "What devilry is this?" And I said, "Me, whenever I see the latest Fox News headline."
Honestly, it's another great line. I also was gonna say like Mithril, the OG bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's like
spike proof, like a giant iron.
literally the best chainmail ever.
Yeah. And so Gandalf is like, we don't have the strength for this encounter. Like, we have to run. And so they run across the bridge. Goblins are shooting at them. They do some trust falls. Legolas grabs Gimli's beard. They get across.
Nobody tosses a dwarf.
Nobody tosses a dwarf. Gandalf.
Also, the chanting in the background, I don't know if you ever had like a headcanon for what they're saying. I always thought it was like, who is he? Who am I? Ha 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 ha.
It's an existential chant. Yes.
Yes.
The goblins are having an existential moment right now. So Gandalf faces off the Balrog. He's like, do you know who I am? I may not be Reese Witherspoon, but I'm the wielder of the flame of Anor. Go back into the shadow before I drop a house on you. Something to that. Something like that. And he's like, he's glowing. The Balrog's whipping with his BDSM whip. And he's like,
Gandalf took them to the gay bar and ran into his crazy ex.
Yeah, and he's like, you shall not pass. Iconic. He slams the bridge and breaks it, so the Balrog falls, but he slashes the whip and pulls Gandalf down. And he's like, fly, you fools. Everyone's like screaming.
Well, he's like Mufasa hanging from the.
Yeah. They're screaming, upset. Aragorn is like getting them out. They escape. That was the final boss of the dungeon, so they got out. But Boromir is like, give them a minute. And Aragorn is like, no, it's okay that they're crying, but like, this will be swarming with goblins. Like this orcs will
Yeah.
kill us if we
Yeah,
don't.
it's one of those moments where it's like I see where both of you are coming from, but also the part where they're like looking for Frodo and he's just like standing there crying and like look at like his one tear. And I was like,
Yeah.
this was the other also when I fell in love with him as a 12-year-old because like, he's so sad. Look at this
Dramatic
emo boy.
turnaround and just
Yeah.
single tear.
Because for them, Gandalf was like
Blue
their
eyes full of
window.
tears.
Yeah. He's their window into this world, like outside
Mhm.
the Shire.
Yes.
He's their
yeah.
connection. They're like, okay, we know someone's looking out for us because Gandalf is here.
I also
Right.
noticed that like Sam continues to call Aragorn Strider, even though like he knows his
Yeah.
actual name. And I feel like it's because like that's what he knows him as. And for
Yeah.
because he also says Mr. Frodo. So it's like Mr. Strider, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. He's just living like he's just a country boy. He doesn't know
Mhm.
how to talk to a king. Yeah. So it's time to go to my favorite Middle Earth kingdom, ruled by my favorite Middle Earth character, Sorry to the Moth, who's the closest the Legendarium has to a protagonist from beginning to end of the arc of the whole Middle Earth lore. So she's
Galadriel.
yeah. So she's honestly it's kind of understated, but she's like the major force for good in opposition to Sauron.
Mm.
and
Okay, but
so-
like who the fuck are these lackeys who meet them? Like that guy is such a twat. I hated him.
Haldir.
Yeah.
He's the
He
meanest
is.
bouncer. He's also
Yeah,
a
I was
gay
like,
icon, but
he's a
yes.
gay gatekeeper. He doesn't
He-
want he
He
doesn't
is.
want dwarves in the community.
No.
No,
Not
yeah.
into bears. He's just
No.
like twinks only.
And that
Yeah.
I do like the scene of Aragorn being like
Yeah,
trying
'cause
to like
yeah, they're going
haggle with
through
him.
they're going through the woods, and Gimli's like, this sorceress lives here, and like she's like talking to Frodo, and
Mhm.
he's like, yeah, like I'm too smart, and then Haldir from CW's TV show about Mary Queen of Scots' reign is there, and he's like, you're so fucking loud to the dwarf.
Mhm.
And he's like, Frodo has evil, he's a dwarf, he can't come in. And Aragorn is like, okay, come on. So eventually they let him in. They take them to the Keebler elf tree, Caris Gladhorn or Huan or something, and it's home of the Galadrim, who are like they're not quite the Mirkwood elves, but they're not quite fancy Rivendell elves. But Lothlorien is like a magical kingdom where like there's no aging and no evil can enter because Galadriel is just that powerful. So they go to the top of the tree and they meet Celeborn and Galadriel. He's like, "Where's Gandalf?" And also, your mission is no longer a secret. Everyone knows.
Well,
that
the
you're
other
here.
thing that I was confused about is he saying this or is he speaking for Galadriel? Because the way he delivers it is so weird.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, oh, does she not speak? It was like
I
I've heard Kate
also
Blanchett's
legit
voice before.
forget that Celeborn exists every time I think about Lord of the Rings. And when I watched the movies, I forgot he existed. And in like this behind the scenes book I have, I was like, who the heck is this guy? And then I was like, oh, I guess that's her husband.
Yeah, he's from a very prestigious family. He's descended, I think, from this king and his nymph wife. So he's got some nymph blood. And so yeah, I was, for whatever reason, I was super into Celeborn lore as a kid, and like his
Glad that
arc,
somebody was, because no one
because he
else
was
knows.
like a sea elf. He like did a lot, and yeah, he's descended from a nymph. So yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So, but she is
Well,
like serving looks and reading them for filth. She's like looking at Boromir. She's like, "You're weak."
well, and he starts crying. Also, like when she's like, "When was seen the eye?" and there's like the things her eyes freaking out. A choice was made there, Peter Jackson. Whether it's not as bad as like low opacity Elrond, but it's there.
Yeah.
We're talking
And
about when she
Maddie's
like
description of Celeborn though was that he's the least interesting character in history.
again, I was so into his lore. I loved his backstory.
But again,
Were
we
we
don't
talking-
get that in the movie though.
Yeah,
We
you
get
don't
nothing.
need it. Yeah.
Go girl, give us nothing.
Celeborn
are
was
we talking
cut in the
about
musical, so it makes sense. Yeah.
Galadriel's like weird prophecy voice thing?
Yeah, that she like
does?
speaks in their heads. Yeah.
Yeah, the graphics on that was wow. Her
Yeah.
eyes go black and she's like glowing, but also kind of looks like she's like an X-ray version of herself.
Oh, that's
Oh,
later. That's later.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I
do
thought
love
that's
that part though.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, the speech is lit, but
The speech is good. Yeah. She's like, Frodo, you saw that and you bear great evil. But she says, like, Gandalf didn't die in vain and hope remains despite the quest being on the edge of a knife. She's like, you got to stick together, which is interesting because that's not what she tells Frodo. But she's.
I also love later when they're like camping, and I was like, we're at Coachella, and Legolas is walking around, and he's just like, I meant for Gandalf. Like, couldn't tell, bro.
Yeah. So they're like, take a break. So they're singing about Gandalf. Legolas is too sad to translate.
Also, Sam's poem
His
for
little
Gandalf.
fireworks poem, super cute.
I love it. And he's like, oh, it doesn't do them any justice.
Boromir's stressed because Galadriel read him to filth. And he's like, I just love my people and my dad. And Aragorn is like, it's okay, I get it.
What did she say to him? Because, like, isn't he dating her granddaughter?
Well, yeah, we'll say what she says to him later. So Frodo sees Galadriel do her little catwalk to the mirror.
I love the scene of her walking to the mirror, and then like I remember being like, I can't walk like that. At my best, I am Frodo just doing his weird little like slow walk down the stairs. I don't know why like that scene of them walking down these steps is very mesmerizing, but it is.
But yeah, and she's like, I have this mirror. It shows the past, the present, and the future. I pour water in. I don't have an oracular pig. But
I always wanted to pour the ways that she does things that are things that may not be. Like,
yeah, she's doing a full baptism like ritual. So he looks in and he sees like the Shire and hobbits suffering under orcs and Sam suffering. He's like, no. And he's like, I feel so alone. And she's like,
which
well, this might happen if you fail. And she's like,
or if you read the book.
yeah, there's some cut stuff. But and she's like, to bear a ring of power is to be alone. She's like, I got this ring.
Nenya business.
Nenya business. She's like, you have strength. But also Boromir's gonna try and take it. And she's like, the ring will corrupt all of them one by one. She's like, Boromir's just the first.
Right.
And she's like, you gotta go
So
your own way.
I feel like she's like, I'm just not gonna pull any punches with you, Frodo, because I feel like you can take it.
Yeah, she's like, we're on the same level. We're ring bearers. She's like, you gotta go your own way, like Gabriela Montez.
Join the
Okay.
I was thinking of like, go your own way.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac recast version. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's too many
mean,
pop culture references, so many layers.
Galadriel has Stevie Nicks energy. That's
for sure.
Oh yeah. She heard the song Rhiannon and she's like, that's my personality now. And
she was originally a goth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, kind of actually.
Yeah, and so she takes the ring, and I said she goes emo, because he's like, take the ring, and she's like, you would have a queen, beautiful and terrible as the dawn.
She's in an Evanescence video.
Yes, yes, that's the energy.
Yeah. Treacher says to sea, all would love me in despair. So she's like, I wouldn't even.
I was like, is that bad?
Yeah, she's like, yeah, everyone would die happy. And she's like, no. And she's like, I passed the test. So this is like her whole arc through the whole lore. So she's like, I've proven that I'm good before I love power. Because he's very powerful, but you know, that can be a temptation. So she's like, I'm gonna diminish into the West and remain Galadriel. And so she proves she's a team player at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It should be noted, Laura Michelle Kelly did a great performance as Galadriel in the musical and has all the best songs in the musical. She gives everyone a gift, mostly weapons, but they all get camo cloaks. Sam gets a rope. In the book, he gets a seed for one of the trees that they live in, and he plants one.
I was gonna say that because I forgot that in the movie he doesn't get that, and I'm like, what the seed?
Yeah, because when she leaves, then Lothlorien will no longer be magically preserved from time. So she's making a sacrifice because she loves her little kingdom, and
the trees or the flowers that grow there, the Eleanor.
Yeah.
Elanor. That's what Sam names his first daughter.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Frodo gets the light of Arendelle, their most beloved star. May it be a light for you in all dark places when all other lights go out. So it's like,
one of my fave lines. I also like it.
So it's like a vial of light.
I named my laptop Arendelle.
Yes. And she's like, Aragorn, I can't you can't give you anything greater than my granddaughter's whole fucking life, so be worthy of her. And he's like, hey, I want her to like live with her people. And she's like, yeah, I get it. Like it's her choice, but do your best, bro. So they sail away. Gimli got he asked for one hair off her head, and she gave him 3.
Which is significant because doesn't her hair have magical properties and they used it to make one of the Silmarils or
Or
something?
the guy who made the jewels that people fought over in the Silmarillion was obsessed with her hair and wanted it, and she was like, nah, bro, like
And
creepy.
I that's what I love knowing that backstory and that she's like, Gimli, you get 3. You're a nice little guy.
Yeah. So they sail past
Gimli
these.
likes blondes.
He
Yeah.
sure does.
He has a type. Yeah. They sail past these giant statues. Boromir is like, let's take the ring to Gondor for our people, he says to Aragorn. And Aragorn is like, over my dead body. And Gollum's still following them. Gimli is like, everything sucks on this journey. We'll be going through rocks and swamps. And I'm like, you volunteered for this. So
Well, there's always that person in the group project though. And my
Yeah.
favorite though is like he's saying all this and like Sam wakes was that when Sam wakes up from his nap or like one of the
yeah.
other hobbits is there and he's just like, what? We're doing what?
So Frodo wanders off. Boromir's creeping on him. Very pedo vibes in this scene. Don't like it. It's supposed to be unsettling.
Yeah.
But he's like, share it, like, give it to me. I need it. Like SpongeBob when he needs water and
I
he's in
need
Sandy's
it, but it's
house.
not the same as water.
Yeah. And so Frodo puts the ring on, and Boromir is like, you've doomed us all. He has this breakdown. He's like, you're gonna take it to Sauron. And then he's
He
like,
says it would seem like wisdom, but for the warning in my heart. Which, like, from the very beginning, both Galadriel and Gandalf have been like, listen to your heart.
by Roxette, yes.
Yeah.
So Frodo climbs up a rock. He puts the ring on. He sees Sauron, takes it off.
He's technically on the seat of Amon Hen, which is the Hill of Seeing.
Yeah, that's like a bigger scene in the book, but it just needs to be this for this story because we're
Yeah, because I
we're
just thought
at
it'd be
3.5 hours, buddy.
He sits in the chair and like goes on a little like, ooh, let's see things.
Yeah.
Reading Rainbow.
Yeah. Aragorn is like, calm down. He's like, I can't trust anyone, even you.
I totally understand why he's freaked out because like
that was a scary scene. Yeah.
yeah, like he's like, who can I trust? This other man was untrustworthy, and I think my favorite part though is when Aragorn's like, he understands what he says. He's like, I swore to protect you. Like the way he says it isn't like, oh, I swore to protect you. You should trust me. He's just like, hey, like, bro, and his hands are open.
Yeah.
He's not like, that body language is important.
Frodo kind of is like, hey, are you gonna take the ring? And Aragorn resists the temptation and is like, go. And Frodo's like, explain it to Sam, he won't understand.
And then he like folds his hand and does this, which
Puts
I always thought was
heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, alerts the Arianator Orc Queen attacks Merry and Pippin. They help Frodo sneak away by like being bait, like in Gods of Egypt. They get kidnapped.
I also like it when they're like when Pippin is like, hey, it's working, and he's like, I know, run.
So Boromir tries to save them, redeems himself, is killed. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli fight the rest of the orcs off. Boromir dies like honorable. He feels bad for what he did. He's like, I tried to take the ring, and he acknowledges Aragorn as his king.
I also think it's like a nice, like he's a very like tragic hero, like Macbeth style character. And I don't know if it's just because he's played by Sean Bean, but like when he's being an older brother to Merry and Pippin earlier, I feel like it's a foreshadowing for this like protection because he's like, they took the little ones. He's ready to be like, just leave me to die and just go now. And because you gotta save them. And like that is his redemption.
Yeah. And he has a Viking funeral, put him in a boat, falls off a waterfall.
And Aragorn's like, I will make sure that like your people won't fail.
Yeah. So that's part of like pushing him to that responsibility of being a king, right?
Yeah.
Legolas,
and I feel like that's also when they like bond in his last moment.
Yeah, it's the summation of the arc. Legolas is like, we gotta follow Frodo, and Aragorn is like, the real fellowship is the friends we made along the way. He's like, let's go save Merry and Pippin.
Let's go hunt some orc.
Yes.
And then he also, not before I also repurpose Boromir's gauntlet love thingies. Like the scene of him putting them on, I'm like, well, I guess he's like, don't want these to go to waste.
Yeah. So Frodo is like he's in his Gabriela Montez moment. He's going it alone.
That is not the way I read this, but okay. He's thinking of what Gandalf told him.
Yeah, no, I mean that's just how we recap things here. But yeah, he's following what Galadriel and Gandalf are like. You got to do it on your own. And so
This is also another of his like very sad boy holding ring, tear falling down
Yep.
face,
Yeah.
like
but
appealing to the tweens in the audience.
Sam's like, or Frodo's like, I've got to go my own way, or whatever. I got to do this alone. And Sam was like, of course, but I'm coming with you. And he almost
you are.
drowns, but
Yeah.
Frodo saves him.
Well,
He,
also knowing the trauma that Frodo's parents drowned, it's like, yikes.
yeah.
He-
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, that's
Also,
horrible.
he's like, Sam, you can't swim because like Sam hasn't grown up by water.
Yeah.
And I do also love the line like, I made a promise, Mr. Frodo, a promise.
Mhm.
Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee, and I don't mean to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Rapunzel, he never breaks a promise. So
Rudy.
yeah, so he's like, I'm with you. And Frodo is like, I'm glad you're with me. Like they're going on. He's like, glad you're with me.
Because Sam is a positive influence because he's just like, I don't know if we'll see them again. He's like, we might, Mr. Frodo, we might. And then he's like, glad you're with me.
He's the contrast to the ring. You know,
Mhm.
like the ring is pulling Frodo into darkness and Sam's there to pull him into like hope.
Yeah.
And
And
then
remind him about like happy things.
yeah.
Think happy thoughts.
And then take it away, Enya, closing of this 3 hour and 48-minute movie.
This is also when Maddie was like, he doesn't get to Mordor. And I was like, there's 3 movies.
Oh
But
my gosh.
to be fair, she made the point that like in Harry Potter, like each one kind of like ends with
Yes.
like there's closure. And I'm like, yeah, because those were books written for kids. This was one book that the publishers were like, we got to split into 3.
Let's talk about the vibes and aesthetic of Middle
Mhm.
Earth. The music, I mean, top tier.
Howard Shore.
Yes.
Yeah.
The music we have a thing in the works, a little project. And so hearing the music that you had referenced for that project, I was like, oh wow, yeah, no, you're right. Those are good vibes.
Yeah.
It's peaceful, but
Concerning
then also
Hobbits.
like, yeah, it's like really nice. And then like in the action scenes, it's very intense. I
I
love
used
the
to
music.
have, well, I think I still have the on CD all the soundtracks. And I remember there would be like special edition ones that came with like character insert.
Mhm.
But I remember being at like a family party where there was a DJ, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go request Concerning Hobbits.
Love that.
Yeah.
Did they have it?
No.
You're like, here's my CD. It's number 5.
The visuals. So I thought like the Hobbits in the Shire have this very like rural British Isles.
Just want to live there.
Mhm.
I also love that it's kind of anachronistic with the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That like everyone else is in like the year like 300 or like 300 to like I'll give him like the year 800, you know, like they're in like early medieval, and the hobbits are full on like wearing 1800s like vests and suspenders.
They
Yeah.
also have a mayor that like the mayor of Hobbiton like is more of like a figurehead, but like they have a somewhat of a government.
Mm.
Also, a fun
Yeah.
fact that is in the book but not the movie is hobbits give gifts on their birthday. They don't receive them, but because there's so many hobbits, you can, as a child hobbit, you could probably go to like a birthday party once or twice a week and just like always have presents.
Yeah. Hobbits have a great look. The orcs, gross, slimy.
Yeah. Disgusting, scary, intense.
Yeah.
Also, when Lurtz like licks the blade because they can't feel pain, it's super gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mordor and Isengard, we love a spiky lair.
Yep. So does the Horned King.
So does the Horned King. They have a better maintenance team than the Horned Kings for both.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Something though about like the one like spiky castle in Mordor, it just looks like nobody lives there.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, that's why in my TikTok, the Horned King, he's like, there's no elevator.
Yeah.
That's a deal breaker. There's so many stairs. Yeah, no one lives there. And then so the elves, we have like Rivendell.
It's like this lair has everything in an abandoned Mordor speakeasy.
Yeah. Orc slime pits. Yeah. The elves, we have Rivendell, which is a beautiful resort.
Yeah.
It's like a spa town.
I
It's
feel
like
like if I
up
had
in
to
the
pick a
mountains
place
and
where the elves
waterfalls.
live, I would probably choose Lothlorien over
Oh,
Rivendell.
yeah, that's right. Lothlorien's my favorite. It's like peak enchanted forest, like beautiful tree house aesthetic, like
Mm.
Not that I
carving
wanted to
off.
build a summer home here, but the trees are actually quite lovely.
Yes.
Mhm.
I'm a sucker for a wood elf. I love wood elf culture. I'm an
Mm.
appropriator of it.
Wow, I
Uh
guess that makes me a Rivendell supremacist because I would love to live there. Waterfalls, hearing rushing waterfalls all the time. I think that'd be great.
yeah. So I think the elves, again, they have this beautiful like aesthetic. The humans, right now the only human place we've seen is Bree.
Right.
Very level one of an adventure in a video game. Uh
It also is like the first time when where they're basically like, we're not in Kansas anymore because
yeah.
Mm.
everything's big
And they're like,
and
get
there's
out
Yeah.
all
of the
these big scary
way.
people. Because like pretty much everyone in the Shire like knows each other, like you're somebody's cousin.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like that's also why in that part where Pippin's like, "Oh yeah, my second cousin twice removed on his mother's side." He's like, "This is just what I would
No,
normally talk about in the
Yeah.
pub."
yeah.
Exactly.
The dwarves, we don't really see any dwarf civilization in this, but we see Khazad-dûm, which they're
Hmm.
like this great city, and I'm like, it's a big hallway, but okay.
That's why I liked in Rings of Power that we actually got to see it in its heyday.
Yeah.
Mm.
We have a Balrog, big fire demon,
10 out
ring
of 10 do
ray.
not want.
Do you know what? We have ring race again, spooky ghosts, the Eye of Sauron, flaming eyeball.
Which I want to say is played up more in the movie than it ever was in the
Yeah, I think
book.
in the book
Mm.
it's more like just like, oh, he's a spirit that's looking, and this is like,
Mm.
no, it's an eyeball. Uh it's
I was in the eye.
yeah. Characters. So Frodo is our protagonist. Do we root for him?
Of
Yes.
course.
Yeah. He's just trying to save the day.
He's trying to do the right thing. That's honestly what he's like,
Yeah, not even
okay,
save
I
the day.
guess he's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, I guess if you guys are going to argue about who's going to take this ring, I guess I'll do it. I don't really have any attachment to it.
Yeah. Um I appreciate Frodo a lot more in this rewatch than I have
I
before.
also see I've always appreciated
Yeah, I'm like,
Frodo,
you
but
always
like
appreciate
Frodo Stan.
yeah, Team Frodo right here. Oh,
it.
Sam just fell. Um, but basically, I think something that I noticed on this rewatch is like when he's dancing around at Bilbo's birthday and he's like happy. I'm like, this is the last time we ever see him happy. And that is so tragic.
Yeah, I've seen someone point that out. I think it was like on Tumblr or something. And again, not super familiar with the movie at that time, but I was also like, wow, that is kind of sad. Like,
Yeah.
because I think eventually, maybe someone in their lives may get to that point and they're like, wow, that was the last time I was ever happy at this thing.
At the
So,
birthday party before my uncle abandoned me and left me the ring of
yeah,
power.
he had
Yeah.
the most theatrical
Because
exit ever.
the ring, like, it eats away at you. That's why,
Yeah.
like, at
Yeah.
one point when Sam's like, hey, you haven't been eating, like, you should eat something. And he's like, it's not gonna change anything, Sam. And like, I was just like, I understand Sam he has good intentions, but like,
But we all need that friend who's like, have
yeah.
you been sleeping? Especially in
Hmm.
college. Yeah. It's like, have you eaten anything
Mhm.
today? I still stand by, I don't think I've said this on air before, but a common statement of mine is you could replace Frodo with Snow White and the story would still work. Like Snow
Mm.
White could achieve the same goals as Frodo. And I do stand by that. Because Frodo's main skills are getting people to like him and defend him and being pure of heart, which are her two main skills.
He's
Mm.
the other thing too that you only kind of get in the movie is like he's smart. He does speak Elvish.
Yeah.
He's also very in the book. He's a little sassier.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, he has some sassy lines.
Yeah.
Uh, but you don't get that as much in the
Mm.
movie.
Yeah, but she could do it. Props to her. Could save Middle Earth if needed. Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Sam, heart of the franchise, just so good and pure, so
Mhm.
cute.
think he had a fire, not a fire,
A
a
frying
frying
pan.
pan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Great job, Sean Astin.
Hmm.
Merry and Pippin, great comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
Bilbo, kind of
Yeah.
a dick.
Yeah. That was so like when like the Hobbit movies were coming out, I was like, wait, why are we making a movie about the asshole uncle from Lord of the Rings? Because I didn't understand it. And I was like, that I hated that guy. I thought he was really rude to
Yeah.
Frodo. Yeah. I don't know. Bilbo.
He's a dick, this is what
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because he was corrupted, I think, by the ring. Like it made him selfish. And like because the whole idea is that like
Well, he was kind of a curmudgeon even before that,
yeah.
because again, I watched the Hobbit movies, so I know all about that. But no, like literally, like he was. I also didn't like him in those movies. Like I didn't like the protagonist. So spoiler alert for when we get to those eventually. Um, he's like I don't think he's that likable. So
Yeah.
it is kind of I don't know. And also knowing like the fact that like how Frodo's parents died and he basically like adopted him and kept him, and it's like wow, he's just abandoning him like that. That's pretty fucking rude.
Yeah. Pretty rude, yeah.
The other thing too is like he adopts him like, but not like when he's little. Like it's a little bit like some time after his
Yeah.
parents died. So like Frodo spent a lot of time just like alone as a
Where?
child in Buckland, like in
With
where
Mary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary's family. Because Mary's
Okay.
younger, like he's a
Right.
younger cousin. The other thing too is like in my friend's podcast where they're rereading The Fellowship right now, and they also talked about like used to like Bilbo, rereading it now. What a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh Gandalf, he's the best wizard. J.K. Rowling is shaking.
Yeah. No.
He's also not a turf, so like
There you go.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
warm. He has this warmth and this sternness, like you would
he's
trust
been through
him.
a lot, and he well the other thing is like Gandalf's one job is to just like try and keep everyone together,
Hmm.
and also like so sometimes maybe he might leave in a hurry, but he's like tries his best to come back when they're like,
Yeah.
why didn't you meet us in Brie? I was delayed. Yeah, I was on top of a tower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are
I was
five.
spinning around on the floor for 20 minutes.
Yeah, there are five wizards. One is busy trying to take care of all the plants and animals. That's a big amount. One
Hmm.
has sold out, and the other two MIA. So Gandalf has a lot.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Aragorn and Arwen, um,
Love them.
love them.
Love them.
Yeah, you get their relationship.
Hmm.
Aragorn standard hero. Arwen is there's a kind of character that I call a Cosette, like from Les Mis or an
Mhm.
Aurora, and that she's like they're not necessarily bad characters, but they're like a woman who represents like everything good in life
Right.
that you need to defend. And it's
Yeah.
kind of Arwen's role, especially in the other films.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was always a little bit like Arwen's there, and yes, I had an Arwen costume that mom made me for Halloween, and I would she have been the character I chose to be from Lord of the Rings? No, but mom wanted to make the costume.
Yeah, we used
And then I
Arwen.
repurposed it for Saint Lucy.
Yeah, we used Arwen costume or an Arwen inspired pattern for one of the fairies when we did Briar Rose, that
Hmm.
musical. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, like it's I just remember she was never a character that was like, oh yes, she's great. Like I feel like I appreciated her more watching it this time. But
Hmm.
as a
yeah.
kid, I was like, she's just kind of there. But I remember one time at a sleepover when we were dressing up as the characters, when someone had like learned how to do makeup stuff, I guess, and did like the
The
scar.
scar.
The sexy
The
scratch.
sexy
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
scratch.
and then when my dad came to pick me up, he thought she actually like he's like, what happened to your face?
And you're like, makeup.
Legolas and Gimli are kind of one note in this movie. I don't think we get
Yeah.
to know
They
them well until the
shine next
others.
movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the books we get to know them more. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
in the next couple movies, they have more of a
Yeah.
personality. Like when I first saw this movie as a kid, I forgot Gimli's name and called him Mines Moria person.
Mm.
Fair. I get Boromir more now.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's beleaguered and he just wants to help his people.
He,
Yeah.
older brother energy, just
Yeah.
trying his best. I saw like a post at one point during the pandemic that was like, as adults, we have to come to realize that we are all a little bit Boromir.
Mhm. So the last few characters, we have Galadriel, Elrond, Celeborn, Haldir. We know I love an elf, especially a gay icon like Haldir.
I was gonna say Galadriel.
They're all gay
Gatekeep
icons.
girl boss. Galadriel's girl boss. He's gatekeep.
Celeborn
Elrond
is gaslight
Gaslight.
because he's like, "Where's Gandalf? I know he's dead." Elrond, to date myself, eyebrows on fleek. He's the annoyed HR manager. Galadriel, best character. I love her. She's both good and menacing. True fairy queen energy. We love Cate Blanchett.
This is all like she gets to be really cool in Rings of Power, and I feel like you should just finish it.
Okay, I will finish it.
Because she's like one of the best characters in it.
Okay, what do we think of the antagonist? We have Sauron. He's the OG Dark Lord.
Don't see him too much.
I think not having a physical form makes him more menacing.
Menacing, yes.
Because I think a lot of Dark Lords that are just like someone doing camp the whole time.
Horned King, I'm looking at you.
King, yeah.
Although Horned King might have gotten some inspo from his from Sauron's armor.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was on that Dark Lord Pinterest.
Yes.
Aesthetics, vibes.
I think what I'm learning is I need to make a whole TikTok series of Horn King on different social medias.
Yes. It's honestly, the voice kills me, even if it's a little bit Cookie Monster.
It's a little Cookie Monster, yeah.
But that's kind of the Callaghan default of like, oh, I'm gonna do this character and now I'm just Cookie Monster.
Saruman, elitist wizard in his ivory
but he's
tower.
Like he's so good at being that evil character because then he's also Count Dooku in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And like he's just like that. He's more of like the scenery chewing, like because he even is like this over the Palantir with his long nails, and I just remember being like, trim those, boy.
Trim those. We have Arianator, Orc Queen, Lurtz. We needed a boss battle, so he was there.
Peter Jackson really loves having orc boss battles because like he tried to insert that in the Hobbit movies and it just doesn't. Cauliflower Man just doesn't work.
Yeah. Ring Wraiths are scary, menacing, especially in that video game. So I guess let's talk about our themes.
Did we talk about Gollum?
He's not really in this. He's alluded to.
Yeah, he peaks a little bit. Like you see him.
We get Gollum more in the other movies. I was more scared of Gollum as a kid than I was of anyone else in these movies.
Yeah, Gollum giving Gurgi energy.
Which came first, Gollum or Gurgi?
Precious. Based on the novel pushed by Sapphire. Okay. Themes. I wrote messages. We have hope uniting against evil. Galadriel says to Frodo, even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Because it's like just one person doing one little thing, which is connects back to our theme with Bilbo sparing Gollum's life. It's like even the smallest person can change the course of the future. Even Gollum, who is really just a recovering addict. Like you feel like as an adult, I feel more bad for Gollum. As a kid, I was like, this guy's terrifying. But as an adult, you're like, he has an addiction for which there's not really a cure.
I don't think social services in Middle Earth is like popping.
Yeah, he is a homeless addicted person. Like that's essentially what he is.
So it's kind of about like the power of like compassion, that
in community.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of fantasy and action can sometimes miss, it's all about family. Was that Fast and the Furious? I've never seen one of those movies. But I think that's the strength that
Vin Diesel loves fantasy, loves D&D.
Does he?
In fact. Do you not know that Vin Diesel, I think, wrote one of the most recent versions of like the D&D book. He wrote like the intro section of it.
Sounds
like,
about
or
right.
like what's the word for
We'll
it? It's
have to get him on the pod.
like a
Yeah.
contributor. Absolutely not. Like he wrote
Like the foreword?
yes, that's the word. He wrote like a foreword, I'm pretty sure.
That sounds about right. There was before break, D&D came up because I was saying something about like, oh yeah, Henry Cavill is a big nerd as well. Like he plays D&D, and one of
Yes.
my students was like, adults play D&D? And I was like, oh, you sweet summer
Yeah.
child.
Vin Diesel wrote the foreword for 30 Years of Adventure.
Mm.
It's also how I felt when the kids were like, you're not supposed to know about AO3. And I was like, 3,000 years ago, Gandalf.
I was
Yeah,
there.
seriously. I was there.
When One Direction sold somebody. When someone's mom sold
That
them
was
to
on
One
Wattpad.
Direction. Yeah.
Wattpad is where my mom sold me for drug money to One Direction. Those fanfics lived.
Any other takes on the themes of the film?
It's something that like when that we talked about after like rewatching them last year, is that like the overall theme of this film and the stories is that like even in times of great darkness, there is hope. And
Yeah.
with the pandemic, all of us were like, we needed this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I knew about the discourse about the love between men, the like friendship love. And I think that was something that I kind of came to appreciate watching it basically from that lens, because like otherwise for me I don't know like how much of it would really ground me, because I have such a hard time focusing with all of the names.
Yeah.
But it is like those small moments that really capture me. Or even like the big moments where like right after Gandalf dies and like they're like mourning, and but they're like, we have to go, like the pain of that. So yeah, I think like the relationships is really sort of what gets me. So like the
Yeah.
community, the tenderness between friends,
Yeah. And I feel
trauma
like
bonding.
the
Trauma bond in the
story, but
franchise,
also I
yeah.
think the acting really sells it because
Oh
sometimes I
yeah.
think about like Nicolas Cage auditioned for Aragorn. What a very
I
different film
gotta
that would have been.
go.
Also,
No.
they thought about having David Bowie be Elrond, which I
Okay,
could
that could
see it.
work. Yeah.
That would work if perfectly fine.
I'd love to see the tester for that, the screen test.
Yeah. I'm gonna steal the ring, Sauron's ring of power.
They recast Aragorn like midway through shooting because like the guy that they had just like wasn't fitting. And Viggo Mortensen, like his agent called him and he wasn't sure if he was going to do it. He had never read the books. And his 14-year-old son was like, Dad, you got to do this. These are
Wow.
good books. And so he like had his big copy reading it on the plane to go to New Zealand.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And because he's so good. Like he like definitely a method actor because he like sewed his coat and like jacket because he's like, I'm supposed to be like on the road. He wouldn't have like someone to repair this, so I've got to like repair it myself.
Wow.
He's a gritty, dirty, sexy man.
This is the kind of method acting I support. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
not Joker method acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no prank. Yeah, Viggo Mortensen not pranking people on set.
Yeah.
Well, he also adopted his horse and also another horse that didn't
Yes.
have a home.
Yeah.
It's one of my
You're
favorite
right.
stories.
He did become a horse girl.
Yes. Then he went to be in Hidalgo.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. So was that our big question? Was that your fantasy?
Yes. Like literally, this is
I
like
think
this in the Muppet movie. They're out there.
the two genders. Yeah. I think I had forgotten how much I appreciated this world, and how foundational it is, and how even though it's very different from something I would create, how much it's inspired me and how much I appreciate it. So I'm going to say yes, it was my fantasy.
Yeah, I think like at the beginning of this, I would have been like, no, I just don't think it's for me. Like certain like high fantasy like this, like is kind of not my bread and butter. But like, and I think I don't know if I said this on the podcast before, but like having these conversations makes me find new things to appreciate about the movie, even if I didn't like the movie. But like, I honestly think that maybe this is my fantasy. I think I actually really liked it. And now I'm like, maybe I should like drink some coffee and like really pay attention, go back to it. But I'm looking forward to the Two Towers because that's the one I do remember a lot of.
Mhm.
I understand battles. I understand trees that talk and walk and carry Merry and Pippin. That's what I understand.
I mean, we got a lot more Shakespeare soliloquies from Theoden in that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I think I just have also like knowing that there's so much like a original lore here with like the orcs and that idea is also really interesting.
I feel like this podcast is me bombarding Hannah with so much lore that I gaslight her into thinking every movie we watch is great.
I love this movie. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. LOTR fan, baby.
Well, I also think that it's a story is good if you can take something new away from it each time you come to it, and
Yeah.
talking to other people and the different perspectives that they bring. I talk about this in English class a lot of times, like your interpretation could be different than somebody else's, but they're still valid as long as you're not like making something up that wasn't in there.
Right.
And like,
Yeah, I mean, we noticed that like when we did Frozen, like a movie that's been so watched and like kind of consumed to death, and then like looking at it with fresh eyes, like appreciating new nuances in their relationships in that
because
movie.
for a while this movie I had seen it so many times and I like didn't want to go back and watch it because I'm like I've consumed this too much. But like in the last couple years and like during quarantine of like returning, it was a time where everyone kind of returned to something they liked when they were 12. For some it was Twilight, for me it was Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like Glee, but I did return to it.
Return to Glee. Like
yeah,
to
I also
Oz.
think another thing that kind of also makes it my fantasy is that it is really exploring a side of masculinity that even to this day the media still really struggles with. And I think this is such a fantastic fantastic, get it? Captain Fantastic, starring Viggo Mortensen. But I also think it's just like a fantastic like exploration of that.
And like
that's one of the things I like about it too.
We just
like,
need more of that.
Real masculinity too, again, because this comes from the mind of someone who fought in World War One.
I love that. That historical context is like this is a person who understands the very complex relationship of people who go through war, and also specifically men who go through war together, and like the closeness and bonds that you create that like aren't always the fierce and brutish. It's like you can be compassionate and tender with each other.
Because you
I was
see
also going
the
to say
horror of violence.
Yes.
I think that's why it's another thing that a lot of us revisited because of the pandemic. But not to keep saying that, but one of the other reasons was because of the article that Cullen was talking about that Molly Knox Ostertag wrote. She also wrote Sam and Frodo fan fiction that she illustrated that's on AO3, and like I cried. It was very emotional. It was really, I was just like, I know this is fan fiction, but it's so good.
Yeah.
I hope my fanfic makes someone cry. It probably won't, but maybe.
Have I read any of yours?
No. It is novel length. All right, and so I think that's what we learned today.
Fan fiction is healing.
No, but I think like because usually we ask what did we learn today, and I think like that conversation about like Lord of the Rings and its relationship with just masculinity is really interesting.
I did a TED talk on that, like masculinity in Star Wars and Lord of the Rings.
I also think another thing is like the violence in this movie. It is not glorified in the way that other war movies would be.
It's scary. It's high stakes.
Yes, and it makes you like I don't feel a thrill watching it. I feel scared.
Yeah, like what's gonna happen? Like, are they gonna get our?
There's a couple cool things where like Legolas shoots an arrow and it goes through two orcs, and you're like, that wouldn't happen, but it's cool.
Yeah, but it's not like we're not celebrating this violence. It's like necessity violence.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that too.
Yeah.
And that'll also be very key in Two Towers too.
Yes. All right. So, Cait, is there anything you'd like to plug today?
Well, you can find me on social media on Twitter while it's still around at Strong Gay Arms. on Instagram at the Artsy Writer, on TikTok at Jedi Master Callahan, and on Tumblr as Griddle Zee Ninth, because it's mostly a Gideon the Ninth focused Tumblr. But I've found myself on Tumblr more, and that was
Same.
something. Yes, that happened last January. I tried to go back to my old Tumblr. I was like, you know what? Can't go back. We'll start a new one. And
Mm.
then everything that's been happening with Twitter, I'm like, glad I did this.
Yeah, for real. Well, you can follow Not My Fantasy on Instagram and TikTok. We're not going to go to Twitter. It's a sinking ship.
Yeah.
We are at Not My Fantasy Pod. And then if you're on YouTube, hi, hello, you're watching this. That's awesome. Leave us a comment, subscribe, like the video. And then if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, doesn't matter where you're listening, go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Tell us what you love about the podcast. Say hi. Let us know what you think about Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and also the other movies that we talked about before. And share us with your friends and family because we want to find more awesome listeners like you.
Yeah. Tune
Waverly
in.
would like to plug being a little cat.
She's like, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah. Transfigure yourself. Oh,
Yeah.
man,
So
just
yeah.
like a cat.
Check out our net later this month. We will be releasing an episode on Two Towers, featuring host of the Slug Club podcast, Liz.
Woo-woo.
Harry Potter podcast, but we're talking about Lord of the Rings. Tune in then. Bye.
Bye.